Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight here on the Insight on Esports channel. As a reminder, you can check out our Discord. It'll be linked in the YouTube video, or you can just do !Discord, and you too can join. And this is important because we are going to be taking Discord questions a tiny bit earlier today as a result of our guests having to do a little bit of scheduling. Our first guest will be on after we do the Discord questions. If you're live, we will move the Discord questions to after the guests for the VOD. But first off, Thorin and I have got to talk about this roster madness that's been going on, especially in the LCS, which I have very conflicted feelings about because we've never seen so many, I think, roster moves halfway through a year, but also the fact that giving some of these players a new chance has been kind of what the community has been beating on in terms of the drum of not just recycling the same players over and over again, maybe promoting people from Academy, but also there are a lot of teams that are actively making themselves worse right now. And it feels almost like it's been too easy for 100 Thieves, the one team that decided to make a positive roster addition at the start of the split, as opposed to other teams just maintaining themselves in the same fashion or making themselves worse. So Thorin, have you ever seen this many roster moves in an esport before? Because this is highly unusual heading into the summer split, especially in LCS.
To clarify, we are just talking about LCS here, because obviously, like in LEC, as far as I can tell, some of those roster moves are like performance related, and those teams probably are fucked if they don't do those moves. So we're not doing that. Basically, the key characterization here is, as far as we can tell, these are overwhelmingly moves where basically this is why you can never ever help people in esports, because there's only two ways it goes. It goes like this: here's an idea you've never heard before, a new idea. Well, that's not an idea I've had before, so I dismiss it immediately. So then what you do is you go, fuck, well, what do these plebs know? Shit, you ever heard of sports? They go, yeah, I remember the old sports ball with Dad and Bucky Roo. What's that all about? And you go, well, in the sports, never mind the reasons, they just do this. And then they go, I'll take it into consideration. And that's about as close as you can get, right? The third option would be, let's just like explain things without it having to be like sports. So unfortunately, it took so long to get people to the idea that maybe for legitimate reasons you could bench people like in sports, that now the prevailing opinion among coaches in North America goes like this: if anything goes wrong, just bench one of your best players. That'll teach him. Cocksucker, it'll teach you very quickly how to be unemployed. That's probably the dumbest possible thing. Basically, in my opinion, I'm not exaggerating. When you bench a player who's a star for performance reasons, I'm not joking, he should never be returning to your lineup as far as I'm concerned. Like, what you've actually had to say then is, it's gotten so bad, I'm going to have to cut it off. I'm going to cut off a functional arm so the gangrene doesn't get to the rest of my body and kill me. And I'm going to go as a three-limbed man for the rest of my days, knowing that's better than dying. There's no, like, I'm going to cut it off for now, and then in 2 months re-attack. That doesn't work. All you've got then is a team with him back in it, with worse practice, who has none of the fundamentals. Like, the whole thing's dumb as fuck. Because I don't hate it, by the way. I've known players that was so outrageous, I might have kicked him in that scenario. But as in, I knew if I'd have kept them in the line, it also couldn't work. Like, there was nothing could be done. These can't be. Just look how many cases there are, Monty. What are we talking now? Like 6, 7 players?
Exactly.
It can't be as extreme as this, guys. It can't be this extreme.
It's also the fact that almost all of these seem to stem from some level of player personality mismanagement, or maybe Dardoch is a case where you could argue, okay, this guy has been benched from so many teams at this point in time. We have on-camera evidence.
Team, sure.
Yeah, we have on-camera evidence that he can be an extremely unreasonable human being. Sure. Whether he's grown or changed or not is a question, obviously, that we can't know.
This, mate. Because when he was going to join TSM, I wrote a piece where I explained, like, look, he's already had a million chances. It's probably not going to work, is it? TSM moron fans, well, that's not true. First of all, you didn't even mention Echo Fox. Yeah, I didn't mention every story ever from his career, by the way. Secondly, I hadn't had the chance to investigate Echo Fox. Spoiler bonus for you. People from Echo Fox reached out and were like, oh, he was doing all that shit here. And then here's the punchline of all punchlines. When I just happened to say it in passing on a show, like, I actually haven't even heard that he's, had any issues in TSM this split. And then I had people from TSM reach out, yeah, he's doing all that shit again. So, spoiler, every single fucking one on the bingo, Dardoch checked off. Every team he was ever in, as far as I can tell, everyone ever, did them all, the whole thing. So, even in his case, beggars belief, doesn't it? Come on, man. I have to say in his case, though, this is the one I don't get right. I don't mind if you're a scenario where it's like a player that's never had issues before. Let's imagine, even though it's not the case, let's imagine the Alphari one had been legit, right? He's just, he's gone to America for the first time. He's wigging out. Something's gone wrong personally with him, and maybe culture clash with Americans. I don't know. There's a million angles you could go with, right? In that scenario, okay, it's a very tough scenario for both people. You've never been in that situation. They've never had to deal with you. The Dardoch one is like, I have no sympathy for you whatsoever. What did you imagine you were signing? So when you made this bum-ass roster for Dignitas that never had a hope in hell of ever making it to Worlds with 3 spots available, you thought, oh, I'm just going to pick up this guy who's way too good for an NA jungler. I'm going to assume there's no reason why he's just available on my team cheaply to be an NA jungler. I'm going to pretend all of history doesn't exist. And then in the summer split, a few weeks in, I'm going to go, this Dardoch guy's got a lot of attitude problems that are really fucking up my team. You know who's garbage? I don't know about Dardoch yet, but here's the order. The GM of Dignitas, the coach of Dignitas, anyone else related to Dignitas, no, whatever. That part's a joke, obviously. What a joke this is. Dude, how many seasons? And then you're buying this player now. This is mental. This is actually insane.
Okay, I think the Dardoch one is one of the more understandable results that happened. But
why is he in the team?
Especially, yeah, exactly. Especially after the spring playoffs where he was clearly tilted out of his mind. You could tell just from the way he was playing. We mentioned it at the time where what he was doing in those playoffs was egregious. Like, he should have been off the team at that moment in time. At least you would have had, some level of practice period between spring and summer to integrate somebody else. Instead, you knew what the problem was. You saw the problem previously. That has always been the problem. And then once again, you end up in a spot where you don't even have time to reconstitute this team in any meaningful way. And by the way, Dignitas could have used that time to import a jungler because God knows they have import slots. So I think really it's shocking what happened there and why this wasn't dealt with in a more expedient fashion. Now, for the rest of the roster moves, I think this is really what's confusing to me, because you look at teams that made no changes, such as, I don't know, Immortals, TSM. These are rosters that we've seen kind of on the rise by making no changes.
TSM ever fuck up and make a roster move which fuck their whole team? Let's make it funny. Give us a fucking break. Why is it all these like orgs I actually care about doing that? Can't get a break, can we? Yeah.
And then, your clearly incorrect video on Jatt from Team Liquid, which the result was lucky again.
Yeah, just so we can clarify this a second, guys. A video I made, which you all, because you're morons, and went, I've seen him on loads of desks over the years at 4 minutes a time, so it must be who he says he is. Let's just check this. Let's just see what level of W we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, the coach got fucking fired. Willingly resigned before Worlds and before the end of a split in which he could have won the split. And I'm supposed to just sit back and go, this can't be a W for me, would it? They only literally removed the guy I said was the problem in their team. Give me a break, guys. Like, there couldn't be a bigger W in this sense. But as usual, Orange Man bad, so we all had to put, Ginger Man bad or whatever. So we had to pretend like I just locked into it again and tripped over and got it all right again. Fucking hell, give me a break.
Well, I think the craziest thing was that people just straight up believed a Team Liquid press conference.
They still believe him at the end, dude. They're still believing the statements towards the end. Like, oh no, actually, it said that it was because Alphari had the emotional problem. But how does any of the story make sense? How the fuck, if it was all about Alphari having real personal problems, does it make sense that Jatt is leaving the team? None of this makes sense. As usual, I learned this a long time ago. Like, cover stories aren't actually supposed to be like, a fake version of the ending of a murdered procedural where it like covers all the case. No, all they have to be literally is a tiny fragment of hope for a moron. And all they it's like giving a little crying child a little fucking dandelion. There you go. That's all they need to just fucking capture their mind.
I can believe that Alphari was having some personal issues, but again, it doesn't respond to any of the other things that happened within this roster, right? I can believe that Santorin is having some level of health issues. That one seems plausible and would explain what's going on in isolation of itself. But like you said earlier, Thorin, what's so shocking to me is that this roster with a sub jungler was nearly capable of winning the LCS last split. So why they were one game away from winning LCS. one game away from going to MSI. And so the fact that everything has exploded, I mean, I want the new breaking point is all I'm going to say, because there's got to be some crazy shit.
Because let's face it, Jensen went on fucking Hotline League, laughed it all off like nothing happened. Core JJ did an AMA days before Jatt resigned, saying, I find Jatt fine to me. So basically, you know, we're all wrong, guys. Alphari having personal issues has made Jatt decide he doesn't want to ever work in the field of coaching for Team Liquid again. That makes a lot of sense. Let's just stick with the official story. It's fucking bonkum, the whole thing. And by the way, I don't find it cool to do what Team Liquid's doing right now. I'm sick of this industry doing this. Well, what you do is this, you go, well, look, because a person is having personal issues, that's fine to mention. No, you're running it as a cover story for your entire fucking org's malpractice. You're making someone's... By the way, that's his fucking... what's it got to do with you to publicise his personal issues? Does he not have his own Twitter account? Can he not mention, oh, by the way, guys, the reason why I've been out the last few weeks is I've been having some... No, you're just going to go out on Front Street yourself as a fucking company. Companies are not humans. They don't have values and feelings. You do that to benefit the company. So I'm sick and tired of that, because people think, right, oh, but it's fine to mention. No, because they run interference with those stories. Those stories are nonsense. Listen, the coach didn't resign because someone had personal issues. You didn't let a coach resign because someone had personal issues. The personal issues never had anything to do with this whole fucking story. It's all a smokescreen. But as usual, people just so desperately need to believe Jatt, I don't know why, is for them a good coach in a scenario where some people disagree. Notice I didn't even say he isn't a good coach. How the fuck would I know? Just doesn't
also
seem like the people who work with him agree, do they?
Well, I mean,
I don't know if you saw this as well. This is how perfect Reddit is. They managed to take the one roster move that was almost inarguably good and make it the negative. Loads of them were going, Monty, I'm not joking, like, I was a Team Liquid fan, I've given up all hope now. You dumb motherfucker. This was the return of hope. You're basically like at fucking Helm's Deep, and you're just like, oh, there's all bloody like cavalry coming over the hill or something. Fuck it, just give up, right? Just kill ourselves, can't win. It's over. This battle's done. Don't wreck. Fuck it, no elves are coming. I'm off. I'm knocking off. I'm not sticking around here. You're so dumb, it's unreal. Basically, if you don't know, I'll make it more explicit. The whole fucking team hated this guy, didn't value his game knowledge at all, and it simultaneously told me they fuck heavy with Cold and think he's legit as fuck as a coach. Who's the main coach now? Oh, it's the guy Cold. The guy who, by the way, was the jungler in the Origin team that actually was one of the only teams that could go head-to-head with G2. I think I like Team Liquid's chances. I'll take him to win the fucking split, mate.
I think here's the other thing too about Cold is that during the off season, so between Worlds last year and the start of this year, Cold was actually one of the most sought after coaches by teams in LCS.
It makes sense. He's got mad player hype from all the players.
Yeah, he had a ton of interviews, guys. I know multiple teams that were going after him. Teams were telling me that they really liked him, thought he was on the ball in terms of his game knowledge and at least his strategic coaching abilities. It doesn't seem like a strategic coaching failure on Team Liquid overall. Clearly not. The fact that they were able to do so well, given the various problems that they've had, especially with Santorin, says a lot, I think, about their coaching staff. And again, to reiterate what Thorin said,
I assumed Jatt was a good coach, because actually when you looked from the outside, you were like, what the fuck? First split he comes in, he's got tactical, then he comes and he has to use a sub-jungle. He's like, from the outside, someone was doing something, weren't they?
Yeah. And I think, too, it's like you said, it's difficult because we weren't there to have a read on Jatt's coaching abilities, and he may be a good coach for a different team, but it seems like...
Certainly.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, his from knowing him and working with him, I will say, like, he is a very calm person. I think he is very capable of kind of working out debates between players, as he tends to take a more questioning approach to get to the bottom of things. And I think he could be with the right players and the right system and the right delegation, I guess, if Thorin, those players' opinions that you've heard are accurate, then I think he could be, if he takes a step back and focuses more on the head coach and like personnel management side of things rather than the strategic side of things, I think, he could be very good. And maybe he was good at that aspect of it. But whatever happened within this team, whatever blow up that occurred, because clearly there was some kind of cataclysmic event that happened that resulted in all of this, because you can tell, because the PR was so hastily done and badly done around this entire thing about how they announced it, that there was something very odd happening on the inside where they could not, you can tell Team Liquid was not in control of this situation and had not come to a PR strategy with Alphari, which probably means that they were not talking to Alphari. if I had to guess, at the time that this happened, because there was no consensus across all parties of how to message this. So clearly something weird happened. Like, we know that. And I think it's odd that effectively what it appears Team Liquid did was initially side with the coaching staff and then immediately realize that they had no chance of Worlds without Alphari, and then just go with Alphari's story and opinion. That is also extremely strange, to kind of boomerang like that. And going with Alphari was obviously the way they were always going to go, because he is much more critical to their team. They paid a lot of money in order to get him onto the roster. He's the core. He probably should have been the MVP last split. I don't think it should have been Blabber personally. And then also, you're looking at who is more critical to this team's success. And going to Worlds, by the way, guys, is immensely important to these teams. And it's immensely important to these teams' sponsors. If you don't go to Worlds, it is disastrous from a financial perspective if that's your expectation. And it has to be when Team Liquid made this roster. Like, anything short of going to Worlds is a failure, period.
And by the way, yeah, I'll be the one to say it. Miss me with your whole storyline about contracts where you're all crying fake crocodile tears because he had an emotional moment when he finally got back in LCS and won a game. You all won't give a fuck about this guy in 3 weeks when he's gone again. You won't shed one tear for him. You all just bought into your fucking Hallmark movie of the week moment where you got to use someone's real life and toil and struggle as some sort of fucked up vicarious little feel-good moment that you just pushed on and went, it's nice that. Now get him out of my sight. I don't want to watch him play League of Legends because you're not going to give a fuck. They're not going to Worlds with EG. They're not winning the split. Listen, for him personally, seems like a cool story. It doesn't seem like he's that good a player. I imagine he'll be gone soon enough. So whatever. Enjoy your week, everyone.
I think Contracts actually is based on his performance in 100 Thieves last year. Now, I haven't been watching Academy this year, but I actually think he is probably an LCS caliber jungler. So I mean, I'm kind of surprised that Liquid didn't make a move on him, because I think he's kind of like the next man up who is LCS capable. But I mean, if they want to run with Armao or whatever, that's cool, I guess. I think it's fascinating what Liquid is doing, and I'm curious when we are going to see Alphari back in the picture and what these issues are that could be resolved in a few weeks' time. I also think, like, talking about some of the other teams that are making these roster moves, like you mentioned with Evil Geniuses, a lot of teams have taken, because there are more games in the summer split for each of the teams, they've managed to kind of rotate in some academy players, which was a lot of the complaints about talent development. Like, we saw Golden Guardians do that this past week as well.
I can't handle this narrative. The whole point of adding more games was to make the split more competitive, to make the region better, to make them able to compete with LPL and LCK that are playing best of 3 all day. So instead, what we do is everyone just tank the first part of the split, because it doesn't matter, because it counts from spring split anyway. We've already got a playoff split. And then we've got double limbs, so it also doesn't matter what placing you are in the bracket, as long as you make top 4. So joke's on you again. You've made the format even worse. And then thirdly, now let's just test out a load of talent for next year to sell to each other incestuously, or to just figure out that actually this guy's not any good. Fuck him as well. So essentially, as usual, what I learned about League of Legends about a decade ago still maintains the case. Every real solution that would solve the problem for 99% of people is abused by 1% of people to utterly ruin the system, but that those 1% are called the LCS owners. So there we go. You can't help them. You cannot help them. Nothing you can do can help these people. Everything you give them, it's like you give them a hammer, they just hurt their own dick and go, oh, fuck, that hurts. And you go, I just have to take my hammer away then, don't I? Fuck me. What, you don't know what to do with you guys. I think also, I do give you this hacksaw.
I also think what's shocking is, like, we can't even know how good 100 Thieves is because everyone else has basically intentionally gimped themselves.
That just sucks.
Now, to be clear, I actually think 100 Thieves could potentially do some damage internationally, especially seeing how the other regions at the same time, and basically 100 Thieves' ability to play such a wide variety of different compositions and champions and being so convincing in their victories. But this 100 Thieves now almost reads like Cloud9 from spring of last year, where it's incredibly difficult to get a read on them because they are just so much better than the rest of the competition. I mean, it's unless we see Team Liquid step up again and actually put Alphari back in, which, by the way, we're assuming that happens. There is no guarantee, guys. There is no guarantee until it actually happens and it starts to work. I'm not believing anything that Team Liquid as an org is actually saying about this entire move. So I'm really amazed by what's going on with a lot of these rosters, because it just seems like in the most important split, teams are either not making upgrades or actively downgrading themselves in very weird ways.
You want to know something funny, right? Here's for real. He's even said it on show, so he doesn't care me saying. Do you want to know for real what Nelson from G2's take on the Western LCS particularly is?
Yeah, let's go.
Just don't play enough games.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yep.
Literally, this man has been there and done it in the LMS and LPL.
So that's what I've said every time.
He's watched and he looks and he goes, look, before we can even talk about whether you could beat these teams, you don't practice as much, so it's over.
Yes.
And he's right, because people don't get the arms race that goes on within the LPL. They stupidly think this, Monty, and I've heard this argument so many times from idiot Western pros. They think, well, of course, if I was in TSM, I'd be willing to try. No. The idea you have to get to the top of your region, already be able to go to Worlds, fail, and then you think, something's wrong with how I'm practicing. That's why you'll never, ever win Worlds. Because in the LPL, no one even told the person in the 15th best LPL team, you have to practice the most insane schedule. They just understand, well, that goes without saying, because we haven't done everything else we need to win, so we better do that first. If you're in Korea, no one has to tell a guy, well, you know, if you were to put in like 6 more days a week work of diligent practice, you could be paid $400,000. No, that player knows I don't even get to be a practice partner if I don't kill myself in practice and work every single day. It goes without saying in these regions that you're not going to have a PSA that convinces everyone in the West. Like, we're just done, boy. It's over. We're WWE. If you want to be WWE, we can have some fun with it. Listen, we've got the best trash talkers in the world. We can go fucking crazy with features. But the idea that, like, any of this, like, as you see, can you imagine being LPL teams looking over at this joke in LCS and all the teams just making roster moves? By the way, when they make a roster move, it's because they might keep that rookie and just go and win Worlds or something. Like, you're doing it just to dick around for 3 weeks. Like, they must just be laughing. They're already that far ahead, but you're just making it laugh now.
I think it's just
sad.
It's interesting how LPL went from, the players controlling the teams, and the LPL used to be notorious because of all the streaming contracts that the players would get, where the streaming contracts were paying more money than the actual teams were paying to the players. So the players controlled the teams, which hurt their practice, their teamwork, the coach's ability to control the players. Now we're talking about 2014 ish here when all of this was happening, 2015. And so that is why, by the way, LPL was doing so badly. But ever since basically the stream wars ended in China, where a bunch of the platforms consolidated, they realized that paying these players insane streaming contracts, salaries, was unsustainable. So then you actually had the teams paying more money, which increased the competition and the control that the teams had. This resulted in addition to strong rookie development of China doing very well. Now, we don't have any of that in the West, and it also is the format itself. We've touched on this before, Thorin, but the effective time to play a best of 1 is not different substantially than a best of 3. When you have to ship the players all the way over to the LCS studio, you have to go into the practice room, get everybody set up, get set up on stage, have your pre-draft meeting or have your pre-game meetings, etc. Like, playing a best of 3, it's already a day commitment to play a best of 1, basically. And so playing an additional hour or hour and a half to get 1 or 2 more games in there is not substantially different, but it does give you more stage experience. So the fact that it's best of 1s and the fact that they're playing 3 of these a week. So most LCS teams will take like Monday off. So today, so when guests join us, they're usually joining us on the day off. And the European teams take Sunday off. But because the European teams only have 2 days a week, they actually have 1 more day of meaningful practice. And what I've been hearing from the managers and coaches is that this 3 best of 1 schedule has really cut into practice time. So yes, I think it's a motivation issue. I totally agree. But it's also fundamentally a format issue where the league, the way the league operates limits your time that you have available to practice to 3 days a week, because you're spending all day to play 1 game 3 days a week. And that's what's crazy to me.
And also, again, am I missing something? When did God wake up and go, and thou shalt never play an LCS game except on Friday, Saturday, or possibly Sunday? Like, he never said that. So if you go and watch the LPL, it's on like every day except
LCK
one out of
is
the
on
week.
every
LCK
day.
is on pretty much every day as well.
5 days a week.
The whole point is, they figured out years ago, if this is a real sport, let's actually fucking schedule it like a real sport and see if it responds. What they do in the West is this. They give you one split or 1 year of best of 3, then go, right, well, that didn't work perfectly in all scenarios, so remove it. It's the format, not the fucking cretin implementing it. And people, no joke, Monty, it's a given now. Or people just don't want to watch best of 3. That's like when people tell me my entire career, people don't have a long attention span, Thorin. You should just do short stuff. I wonder who won that one. I wonder who probably won that one. I think I did on that one. The point is, if so much shit, no one's going to watch it 3 games in a row. So if your whole premise is, well, my format is so good because it makes my dog shit product not get really boring for people. So it sounds like you mentioned want to improve the format, mate. Like, and the product itself. Why not do the best format with the best product? Level it up.
What I love, Thorin, is like the assumption.
Because you'll never beat this, by the way, Monty. Because here's the other comeback they always do. And as soon as they say this, my heart sinks because the conversation's over. They go, but who wants to watch 4 games of the worst team playing?
Precisely.
You want to be watching them playing. Nobody watched the Cleveland Browns play American football for about 20 years. 20 fucking years. And you know what? You could watch the NFL perfectly fine. You never missed a single thing. You ever get every now and then, maybe you saw one game that got televised, and at no point did anyone go, this is really limiting my ability to enjoy the NFL, not being able to watch the Cleveland Browns. No, the point is you'd only watch 8 hours of sick games and you'd skip the shit you don't want to watch. And you know what's best as well? You would see a massive impact on the worst franchises, and it might actually, are you ready for the good franchise? It might actually do something to get these cocksuckers thrown out. When they then don't bring any views and they're filling up 4 hours a week, you might actually have to kick them out then, Riot. That would be a good thing for everyone.
The other thing too, Thorin, that I find interesting is that there is this underlying assumption whenever these conversations are had that it must be a league format. They're like, well, I don't want to watch the same number of best of 3s between, I don't want to watch the same number of best of 3s between Rogue and G2 as I do SK versus XL, right? Well, we live in a purely hypothetical universe. Use the power of your fucking imagination and say, what if we didn't play a league format? What if we just scheduled fewer of the bad games and more of the good games? Like, these are all options. These are all options. And we've talked about this before. When we designed the Flashpoint format, it was a hybrid tournament league system. Because here's the truth about these teams. They have to have a certain number of games so that they can have value for their sponsors and that they can go to market and sell. But you can also make them have, fewer games while increasing the number of good games for the good teams, which gives you a base floor of games you're going to have. But if you use GSL brackets, which is a double elimination group, what you can do is you can make sure that the worst teams only play 2 best of 3s, but the best teams play more best of 3s. They can play 3 best of 3s, right? They can play 4 best of 3s potentially. So these are the options that you have when you manipulate formats so that you can create more good games, fewer bad games, but still set a base floor of games. Like, I think that as much as I enjoyed having the champions bracket where it was the groups into the single elimination bracket back in the day in Korea, I understand that for many teams that are eliminated within the first few days of the tournament, that's not very good for teams that have paid massive franchise fees. So you have to find an adjustment there. But this is the arguments are so disingenuous whenever I see them, because the underlying assumptions are we have to have a league format, or we have to have a format where all teams play equal amount of games, which just is not true. It's just not true. You can make whatever you want, in fact, and no one is out there actually proposing decent formats for these systems.
Also, like, 2 things. One, again, I realize this is the business model. It's just not what I chose. Who the fuck would ever want to be in a system where the worst, least contributing member of the group goes, base everything around what I want? That sounds like a madness for a start off. It sounds like almost some argument against democracy. By the way, I always say this. Democracy is the crowd choosing Barabbas over Jesus. Thumbs up, guys. That's the system you guys love. Second point, They actually, if they'd have ever thought it through, Riot Korea didn't do this because they just took their cues from the giant bunghole that is Riot Global. The obvious move was this from day one, Monty. Just make fucking NLB a bigger thing, and then when you go out, you're still in NLB and you still have TV viewership. Like, that would have been the real move, but that would involve actually supporting the grassroots scene. Instead, what they did was cripple the grassroots scene for about 3 or 4 years until finally some teams just through brute force got through the challenger scene that were good, basically Griffin and Damwon, and then they had to be like, oh, maybe we should actually do something with this challenger thing, like sound. So you figure that out 5 years too late then. As usual, they never. The problem with Riot is really this, and it's a feature, not a bug. They just do that thing where they fuck things up so badly, only they know how to fix it, and then their fix is a very inconvenient, not very good one. But they go, well, I'm the only one who can fix this bloody mess I caused. And you go, well, I guess you win on that one then, mate. I don't have the control. I'm not the fucking like a priori prime mover, am I? So I can't win on that one.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think all of these issues are so deeply intertwined, which is here are the following issues that it's very difficult to untangle. The format issues, the lack of practice issues, which the format and lack of practice issues create the problems that we see in terms of LCS teams getting better. The lack of an amateur pipeline, which now, I don't know if this is a semantics war or what's going on, but it seems like what Travis reported on, what the commissioner of LCS is saying, that could just be nitpicking semantics. But I personally have also heard that certain teams want to remove the academy requirements, or at least change the academy requirements, just to save money, basically, is the answer to that. And so instead of kind of building up this robust path to pro, there isn't anything at all. Or it's an optional system, or we might have some amateur teams come in and try and make money by selling the pro players that they develop. But, in order to make that profitable, I'm just telling you guys, like, you can't pay the players very much money because you're basically gambling that you're going to get like a 6-figure buyout for one of these players. And when you're making that gamble on in a business sense, you have to keep wages like super low on that one. So look, I think the whole situation is rough, and I think it all goes back to the fact that viewership also for LCS doesn't justify huge investments in the league. I was watching this past weekend, and there were 50 to 60,000 concurrents on the main stream, and then you also had on the main Twitch stream. I don't know what it was on YouTube, and then you have some of the co-streamers. But we're looking at maybe 100,000 concurrence across all streams, maybe a little more, I would guess. And that's tough. I think that's tough to sell the sponsors against when we're talking about players that are costing millions of dollars a year. I mean, some of the roster investments have been really, really significant. So it's gonna be rough, guys. I don't think there are a lot of good answers to all of these issues within LCS. I think the only reasonable answer is that LCS is no longer a major region. I think that's the real answer, unfortunately. All right, we're back with our first guest. Thorin, what nobody ever mentions on these shows is that as long as we wait long enough for someone who kind of likes us to join one of the orgs that we rag on, we eventually get a guest from that team. And so there's two tactics.
He was on TSM. It's true. We actually did. If you go back last year, we had him. Go look it up. He didn't last long, did he? So if anything, sort of makes sense the way that went. But I think Yamato's going to last a bit longer.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Right now, as far as TSM goes, I love Power of Evil. I'd love to get Hooney on the show, frankly. Maybe I'll try and get that done in the coming weeks, see if we can make some inroads there. But for the moment, so the other tactic we use is to wait till a player leaves that org, and then we get them on to trash that org.
Yes.
Tell their side of the story, as it were. I suppose is the way that it should be phrased. But now, we have a Fnatic member. We've had it before, but more infrequently from Fnatic. YamatoCannon has kindly agreed to join us again. I waited until his team started to do well, getting a big win off of G2, making sure they're confident. That's part of the game that you have to play with guests, is like figure out who wants to talk that week and who is confident, and then strike right at that moment. And then, that way you get them on the ups when they're feeling good about themselves, as opposed to trying to get commitments too far in advance where then they go 0-2 or 0-3 in a week, and then they're just really a big bummer on the show. So you're not going to be a bummer this week, are you, Yamato?
I guess not. I don't think I've ever been, even though there's been times in my career where I've gotten fisted. So I'm sure it'll be okay.
Right. Obviously, I always mention this. There's a certain section of like the community, some of them, by the way, even in the industry, who just think that like you're just like a pretty face or a guy with a good sounding voice, or you do like the on-camera stuff well, but are you really that good a coach? And because by the way, they all stupidly think that like being a good coach is like we'd put up these blackboards next to each other and everyone's doing X's and O's. Like it's like fucking. It's not like the Wizard movie or something. You daft fan. It's a fucking like it's a person business. It's like about networking skills. But here's the thing though, Yamato. Coming into this split, I didn't see any hype whatsoever around your team. I didn't see a single person who's an expert. Like, I love these moves. I think Adam is going to be the best top laner. And like, in fact, I'll give you the list of takes. These were unanimous across the industry. Everyone was like, no matter how good the Adam guy is, he's not as good as Bwipo. Bwipo might know jungle, but is he going to be a good actual jungler? And can he do it in a role? Remember, he's replacing fucking Selfmade, who previously was one of the best we had in the whole league a year ago. You know, Niski, whatever, they were kind of like average on him in the summer. I think people who actually watched the games knew you had a good bot lane anyway, but that was maybe the one bright spot. So most people actually, if they want to go with the angle that you're like a fake coach, this lineup's making that look pretty fucking bad, mate, because no one even hyped this lineup. It doesn't even have a piece on paper that's supposed to be like top of the league. So you must have done something big with this squad, mate. What have you turned around? What have you changed?
Honestly, I think, on the topic of the players that I have, like usually I know that you guys have also seen this because you have like a lot of inside information, but sometimes something so small can be the difference maker from making everything look good or from like looking complete shit. It's always like a little small nuance that just unlocks everything, right? And I think in spring as well, I think roster wise we were really good, but we just couldn't figure out like what was our principles of the game, what were our bases of the game, because I think the expectations we set for the spring split was just wrong. I think there's just so much more to it than just having like the best players. It's more about making sure that your players function as a unit, that they have a collective emotional intelligence, a collective ability to solve problems, because you could have one fantastic player that understands the game at a very high level, but if some players are not at his level, they're not going to operate on his level at all. It's just going to look silly. One guy is like seeing this play ahead of himself, and he's going to annihilate it. He maps it out, and then he expects his teammates to play it out accordingly, but then they just don't understand, and then it just looks very, very stupid. And in our case, I think now with this alteration, I think with the lessons from spring and just putting Bwipo in a more central role, I think he can just connect the dots and the pieces a lot better than what we managed to do in spring. I just think that jungle is an absurdly responsible, packed role. Like if you make a mistake, everyone's going to feel it. If you do something good, everyone's going to feel it too. And I think Bwipo thrives under responsibility. So just that decision in itself, I think, that's where the credit should go to, because I just do my thing.
I think what's overlooked about Fnatic too is that when you came in at the end of last year, I don't expect you to comment on this, but it's pretty clear that from everything that we know that Reckless kind of committed to being on the team and then bailed at the last second to go over to G2, which means that you had to make some really, really fast adjustments, especially around a player that was so core to Fnatic's identity. And you had to deal with that very quickly, which obviously getting upset huge for you guys. He's a great performer, has performed very well for you this year. But then also one split later, all of a sudden you're dealing with another pretty major roster change, which is bringing in a brand new top laner, as you say, swapping Bwipo over to the jungle position, which at least I can understand philosophically. And getting rid of Selfmade, who again last year was really hyped up as being kind of the star player of the Fnatic roster. So to lose kind of what people would view as your two stars in under a year has been a really, I think, tough adjustment. What was because it seems like this was mostly outside of your control. So how are you handling those changes?
Well, coming into the team, I didn't feel, back in 2020 when I joined back in December or whenever it was, I didn't feel like it was right for me to give too much input on what the roster should have looked like. Like the input of the players was more valuable at a point in time because the core of the roster would remain the same. And I would trust that the the management and of course the players, they know exactly like what they think is going to work with them, right? So I didn't have too much input. I'm very happy with how it played out with Upset, because I think the Upset is just phenomenal. Like I wouldn't want to switch him out for anybody. Later down the line, my intention is always to work with players in the capacity as if I can only see myself I can only give myself completely to a situation, a player, if I can't imagine replacing him, like I make a commitment to him that there is no other player in this position, it's just you, and then I just commit myself to this person, right? And I wanted my players to think the same. And then in regards to how things were going to play out into summer, of course, the Fnatic HQ just need to make decisions that is going to serve them in the long term. And the Bwipo jungle idea, Bwipo swapping in general, is an idea that has been floated, and it just felt like the right time to do it, because I felt for us to have a significant impact in summer and for us to uproot ourselves from some of the issues we had in spring, we needed to just make a shocking shift. And I had full faith in Bwipo switching, because he has role swapped in the past. He's just a very knowledgeable player. So I was just fully supporting that, and we had the opportunity to pounce on Adam, because in the end, I think the fear was that if Adam stayed in K Corp and then he would go into the off season, maybe between 2021 and 2022, that all the other big players are going to compete and we're going to have a rough time. And we just wanted to strike fast, and we knew, that we wanted to keep Bwipo in the team at all costs. Like he's just a central figure in the team. He's a driving force and he's a leader, and I think that just belongs in the jungle. So if I had to make that choice, I would have to, I would do the choice again. So in terms of how things have been playing out, it's been interesting, but I don't mind too much, because at the end of the day, I feel the same way. Like I'm committed to my 5 players, and that's what it is for now, pretty much.
I think the weird thing is, when you make a move like this, even though I actually don't believe they did do this, when I had the guy in a flame from SK on Crackdown, he built the move that they were making with the whole Jez is coming in and then Treats going to Jura. He built it as like, look, we don't want to just be like a bottom playoff team and then just lose anyway in summer. So we're making this move with the upside that if it goes completely perfectly, we win the whole league or we can go to Worlds. The idea is like you're saying like, look, I understand my team isn't the best right now, so I am gonna panic switch. I'm gonna throw this. In your particular case, like a lot of people also thought, like, should Fnatic as an org be doing that? Like shouldn't you already have like good enough players? You can just do a tweak. It looks like it's actually working at the moment, though. Like potentially, it's massively upgraded things, right? The team that came into the summer before the moves, I personally thought was going to be like playoffs, if anything. That could have been like even borderline not make it with some of the other moves we had in the league. What do you think?
I still think it's quite early to say, right? We won a couple of games, and I don't want to, come across as, too overconfident. But I think the key thing is we had enough firepower in terms of like player talent to do well in spring. We didn't manage to do it, and then it comes down to the relationship and the culture and the identity that the team has, and. I believe jungle support is such a central point of the game, and Hilly and Bwipo have so much history playing together. They love playing together. They are like brothers, right? They are almost like bound by blood, and just putting them in the more like a situation where they just have more proximity just seemed so natural, because in terms of who makes the major decisions in the game of what goes on is jungle and support. And when you have 2 players that align perfectly in those positions, things are going to pan out better. And I think in terms of firepower, like player talent on the squad, I don't think we made any type of downgrade, but it's easier for me to say because obviously like I worked with Bwipo and I saw him interact, and I saw him as the player he was beyond what is seen only on the screen. I saw what kind of a leader he is. I saw how knowledgeable he is, and that just made the decision much easier for me, of course. And I think sometimes, like we've seen it many times, where you have 5 great players and they just can't piece it together. I think, for example, now with G2, like obviously I have great respect for them, but the performance we faced was not like I expected more, right, from G2, and I'm hoping to see more because I want to beat G2 at their best. But they have on paper.
I'm not sure those days are
fantastic
coming
roster,
back.
right?
I don't know if those days are coming back.
Who knows, right? I'm gonna go into every match against them with a lot of respect and a lot of confidence. But that's an example of 5 great players not managing to piece it together in a way that makes sense for everybody on that roster. I think those personalities that manage to piece it together are sometimes, overlooked in dynamics, and maybe that's what Perks was.
I mean, I think the swap you guys made makes a lot of sense. Like you said, you already have the established relationship between Bwipo and Hylissang, so it's a synergy that you can leverage very highly. And if you have that high level of synergy, especially with a mid laner like Niski, who tends to sacrifice for the rest of the map, then it also makes sense that, they could rope Niski into a lot of these kind of plays that they're trying to make. You have a relatively conservative like ADC and upset, and then what you did was you got a rookie top laner known for his carry potential. And while I don't know if, I enjoyed the concept in earlier with when you guys were playing Olaf and you tried to really play compositions that would enable the Olaf, I'm not really sure that's like a tier 1 strategy overall, but I appreciate you guys playing into his strengths and trying it. But you can really see that you had a very strong idea of the identity of this team going in, and all of the pieces kind of make sense together. And I think one thing you're kind of glossing over, Yamato, is you're being very humble, but you guys are 5-2. You're tied for second with Rogue in the league. But the only 2 games you lost were your first 2 games against the reigning champions of Mad Lions and the current #1 team of Misfits, who has also undergone a lot of success. And since those losses, it feels like over the past couple of weeks, you guys have worked out a lot of the kinks, and you're on a very strong upward trajectory, winning your last 5 games in a row. So, right now, you're looking like, based on the current level of improvement, that you can be championship contenders within the LEC. You're super legit, right? I mean, the wins haven't come against, one of your wins was against Rogue, one of them was against G2. Some of the other ones were, I would say, against less impressive teams like, Excel and Astralis. But overall, I think the progression and the improvement has been super noticeable. So were there any things you kind of took away from your week 1 losses and adjustments you made to get on your current streak now?
I think, always coming into the first week of LEC and the competition starts again, you just get to see, you get exposed to so many games besides your own scrim games. You get to see so much footage of what works. We lost 2 games against Akali, and it turns out this champion just deserves to be permabanned. And that was a part of our preparationary just miss. I can also admit that in the first initial games we were a little bit nervous. It's always that first exposure to the competitive matches. In my imagination, I had hope that the players, I always tell them it's the same game, you're playing the same game, but in reality it just isn't. Right? I know that because I was a player in the past. It is different, right? And we just had to, map out how the players were and how they behaved on the matches, and then we had to figure out, in order to, I worked together with our performance coach to make sure that we have good rituals coming into the matches, and we just figured out, some of the mistakes that we made. And a lot of the things that we learned in spring, we also reapplied them, and I think this just went a long way. I think we figured out what the meta was for us, we figured out what works and what doesn't work, and I think that means super much in best of ones too. I think often you can find yourselves, just because the nature of best of ones, you can just lose games in a silly manner sometimes. Like the Misfits match, I think we were 5k gold ahead, 6k gold ahead, and we just lost a Rift Herald fight because we just didn't know how to fight with the composition that I managed to draft, so I put that blame on me. But all in all, that first exposure to a competitive match, I saw how Adam was, I saw how this dynamic was, and that just helped us fine-tune a lot of things coming into the next matches pretty much.
See, the devil's in the details, Monty. He said that he let it slip. He said they brought in that UK guy to help them do some good rituals. Yeah, I knew someone sold their fucking soul to get a team with all self-made and reckless. Top 2 in the league? I don't think so. This is some dark magic went down the crossroad that day, I'm telling you right now.
No, Fabian is not, this is his first esports team. He used to work in the Berlin basketball team, so he's busy in traditional sports, and it's a nice crossover because He was competing, and like they had nothing to do with esports. He's like confused sometimes with some of the arguments that we have, and people being so passionate about improvement and reviewing, and that's unique to him. And he's been very helpful because him and I we align on many things, because like I see the similarities in esports to traditional sports, because as you mentioned in the conversation we had before, it's just like coaching is managing people. That's what it is, right? Sometimes even children, because some of the players you could come in, they fly in, they don't have, the skills to they're not mature, right? So definitely, I think there's a lot of crossover, and he's been very helpful.
One thing I want to know about is, in the past lineups of Fnatic, it was actually the opposite problem. They had all this talent on paper. People were even voting them every year, like all LCS players. But then they would always seem to have some sort of like a disconnect in terms of how they wanted to play in the game. So famously, if you ever listen to the like mic checks, it would be like Hylissang and fucking Bwipo trying to get their way into every single fight. Meanwhile, like Reckless and fucking whoever back then, could have been Brox and Nemesis, they were always trying to be like, no, back off, we don't take this down. So there was clearly like a fundamental disconnect in how people want to play. With this squad, even though it's like role swapped player, totally inexperienced player, in theory, people don't think of guys like Niski as like a big voice necessarily. How have you managed to solve that? Because this Fnatic looks a lot cleaner in that regard. Like, it looks like the identity of the team is a lot more established than even cores that played many more years together.
Well, what I've tried to do is I've tried to guide the players to solve their own problems. I realized in the past, and it feels so outdated at this point in time, in the past, maybe like in season 5 when I was working with Rocket, I would hold reviews and I would just show them a bunch of things, and then half of the time 2 people are looking at the ground and they're like sitting like this, and someone is like scratching their leg, and someone is playing with some random object they found, right? It's just hard to keep them engaged, right? Because it turns into school. So what I'm basically doing is I'm pushing them to solve their own problems. I'd rather sit there and listen, and then I'll just wait. And if the things that I would say are being said, then I just, okay, guys, let's do this. You guys solve the problem, because in the end, on the Rift, they need to solve their own problems. They need to solve their own emotional problems. And I'd rather push them to strengthen that ability. And in terms of how the game is going to be played out, I believe that you can play out the game correctly in many different manners. And I would rather have the solution come from them, because sure, I have my own philosophy and how I view the game. And sometimes we have, a battle of ideas that can be very beneficial and fruitful. But at the end of the day, I need my players to believe in the league that they're playing. And I push them to solve their own issues in terms of how they want communication to be handled. Because, for example, I could be offended by someone, calling me a slur in the middle of the game, right? Yeah, what the fuck, just TP you, motherfucker, whatever, right? And then maybe some other player doesn't get offended and he gets motivated by it, right? So always with dynamic, I can't inject myself into it, because I need to play the game through them somewhat. And so the whole idea of the approach we're taking in this summer is to push the 5 players to solve their own problems. And I'm kind of like the backbone. I'm the final piece if something isn't said or isn't mentioned. And I think this goes a super long way, because in the end, they're actively and engaged in the process of improvement. And I think that has helped us super much.
Listen, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, as I would say, listen to that idea, like listening to 5 players, letting them have their input, figure out their own issues, don't want to import too much. It could work. Fancy Jatt. Sorry, fancy that. So edit that out, please. Edit. That was a pure accident. So that was an accident.
I think too, just based on kind of the perception, is that both at times Reckless and Selfmade were rather selfish players in the way that they approach the game. And in a way, like the roster that you've constructed and the method that you're using seems much more beneficial, because look, I don't know Adam at all, right? But the rest of the players that you have tend to be a bit quieter, a bit more reflective in their nature, like especially knowing Niski and Bwipo. And tend to just kind of voice their own criticism in a more passive way. And so it seems like the new roster is kind of a more gentle / team focused approach, reflective approach than I would have perceived other rosters to be. Has that been true? I mean, you've coached so many teams. What is different about these players' attitudes?
Well, I think, like I try to separate the personalities from what I expect from them. Because, like, for example, if I didn't engage in the reviews, then mostly like Upset and Whipple would just constantly talk, and some of the people that are less accepted, like Niski, would never have the opportunity to talk.
Let me clarify here what I mean,
Yes,
because
yes.
people are going to be like, oh, you mean like Whipple obviously fucking loves to talk. Like Upset is very vocal. It's not about being vocal. It's in the way that they express themselves. Is that Whippo almost has like when he talks, he's almost like figuring out his own thoughts while he talks, as opposed to telling other people what he thinks. And I found Niski to be the same, similar in many ways in my conversations with him, where he's engaging in a dialogue to learn something about himself, not to tell you what he knows, if that makes sense.
Yes. And sometimes that can be, golden. That can be like the best thing, just hearing his his thoughts just flowing. And sometimes we go on tangents, and all of a sudden he's teaching us how to cut a pineapple without wasting. Like it just goes into tangents, right? So I just make sure that the conversation is started in the right direction. And sometimes, like we have, for example, Hilly and Adam, they aren't as talkative, so I just push them forward. Like I elevate them. Oh, what do you think? Just simple things, simple nudges like that go a long way. And that's like, if I compare the differences between this team and like, for example, in spring, I think the mistake I did in spring was I took for granted that I'm joining Fnatic, and I just, these players have smacked me. I've been smacked by Fnatic my whole league career, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna come here and learn things, learn their way, right? So I just forgot what I believe in. Like I didn't pursue what I believe in. I didn't push for the culture that I believe in, and this is something that I've tried to achieve in every team that I've worked with. Like this is the environment we had in Vitality, but the difference between Vitality and this team was we were almost like barbarians in Vitality. We had this confidence about ourselves, like when we were loud and we were big, that made us, perform. We had this confidence about us. Like we walk into a game, it was as if we step into war. And with these boys, it's a little bit more different. They want to joke a little bit more. They want to, be a little bit rash with each other. And that's okay, right? Because this is their dynamic. But at the core of it, what I try to push for is just to make sure that everyone's engaged in the process and that they actually care about one another. Like I want a group that wants to solve problems. If we have a problem in the top lane, it's not an Adam problem. It's a team problem. We're going to attack it together. Because I think this is, the only way to do things accurately. I think sometimes you fall into those holes where you try to solve too many problems at once and you end up solving nothing. And I think this is what happened to us in spring. And I think past Fnatic lineups was just, they found success because they had just 5 professionals pretty much that just figured out their own shit. It wasn't necessarily team play. They just kind of made, band-aid solutions to kind of give in to one another. It's like, oh, this is how you play. I disagree with it, but I'm just gonna give in, And yes, that goes just that far. It doesn't get you far enough if you want to like win. You need to have agreement. You need to have, you need to believe in what you're doing. I feel, and I think this is what would be different if I compare this Fnatic lineup to maybe some of the past ones. I would say, yeah.
Dude, think how crazy this is. If this was LCS instead of LEC, some of the stories from past years of Fnatic teams where, like, right up until the end of the summer split, it becomes like a pressure cooker scenario where, like, all the stories are like, player A is going this way next season, player B, there's no way he's going to be there, player C hits player A, the management are losing control, everything's going to shit, they're never even going to, and then somehow they always place top 3, they go to Worlds, it all gets recovered, most of the players stay on the roster. Dude, if this was LCS, like, Reckless would have been benched years ago, everyone would have been fucking benched. That's just the new approach they're taking in LCS now. Like, what people don't know is the amount of times top LEC teams have not figured it out, but just come together, like you're saying, Yamato, with a crazy band-aid fix, like in week 7 out of 9, and it just happened to work. And it doesn't mean you're at your best. Like, it means you might even know, I'm going to go to Worlds and probably get my ass beat. Like, we can only play 1.5 stars of League of Legends, but you just do it because you have to do it to get the results at the end. Like, what do you think as someone looking out across to LCS in this regard? I mean, these stories must be bizarre, seeing, teams benching star players every bloody week. And what do you think on some of these issues?
It's very strange to me because, like, I know that, like, I have the expectation for my players that they shouldn't involve their ego into the team. And that's a very difficult thing to do because the community celebrates big egos, right?
Oh.
And there's this dilemma that every pro player faces. And with that, the same thing applies for me, right? There's the saying, like, there's no player bigger than the team, but there's definitely no fucking coach that is bigger than the team either, in my mind, right? Maybe in traditional sports it's very different because I could be like a wise man that has a lot of experience, 40 years of football experience. That's going to be relevant.
yeah.
But what I knew in season 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe it's relevant a little bit, but I can teach you how to lane swap, but they fucked it with the turret change, right? So it's completely irrelevant, right? So the key difference for me is just, like when you have, like the key thing I look at is motivation and intent. Sometimes, like in teams that I've worked with, we've had harsh arguments, we've had heated arguments. There's been things that if they came out to the public, it would be like, what the fuck is happening? But it's the context of all the time that we spend together. It's like, I don't know how, it's countless amount of hours that players and teams just in general spend together. Like just today, we spent more than 10 hours together, and now I'm here, and then afterwards I'm going to call them up and we're going to talk about 11-13, and we're going to continue. So we spent countless of hours together. And in those heated moments, the key thing is just motivation and intent. And sometimes emotions have a way of manifesting themselves. Sometimes someone can get angry and pissed off, but maybe in the back of it, there's a good reason. So you just need to dig a little bit deeper. If my ego gets hurt in that moment, we're not going to progress, because that's the only thing I want. I want to progress. I want the players to believe the same. So I need to, of course, abide by those principles too. If I expect it from them, they should be able to expect it from me. So in moments where a star player has been behaving bad or something, I just need to dig a little bit deeper. What's going on there? There has to be a reason, because in the end, as long as I know this guy wants to win, there will be a way, right? There will be a way, 100%. If I can know for sure this guy wants to win and his intentions are that he wants to win, and it's not just malicious, it's like, fuck this, I'm leaving this team, I want to fucking piss off, when he's just out of the team, then it's just a different conversation. But if he's just angry and emotional and you can see the intent behind it, I think this is where I would draw the line. And I've never come across a player who's like just completely gives up on it. Well, never. I think it's been like 2 occasions, and I've worked with maybe 200 players, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time players do want to win.
And I think that's the difference. And I think that's a really good approach for a veteran coach, is like, as long as they're angry, that they still are passionate about results, right? It's when they're apathetic that you really have the fundamental issue that might, necessitate a roster change. But if they're pissed off, they still have some level of motivation to win. And competitive people tend to get angry about not winning. So you can tell the passion at least is still there. You just have to figure out what the solution to that is.
Oh, for sure. It's like, if I don't get it, like in traditional sports, you can just dig a little bit deeper and you can see some of the shit that these players do, the way they behave, and they fuck around, and they are divas and all that shit. It's common, but that's the beauty of management, right? You figure these people out. Like as a staff, you should have pride in being able to support a player that has potential, and then you figure out the puzzle that human being is. I think that's what is exciting about coaching, right? So it's strange to me the moment, ego gets in the way. It's like, oh, he goes against what I believe in. Oh, fuck this guy. I don't believe in this ever.
What do you actually think of the rest of the LEC, though? Because like Monty alluded to before, becoming into this split, in fact, this year rather, was probably the wackest storyline of all time, which is where fans just got it wrong. As the good thing about Reddit fans is they'll get it wrong in the most epically stupid way possible. So the take coming into this year was, let's all blame G2 for being way too good at business and GMing, because they've made their team too good, and then everyone else can't compete. So let's blame them, not all the 9 teams that can't compete. Now, obviously, that didn't end up being the case, because after one split, they themselves didn't win. They weren't in the final. 2 different teams very well could have won. Like Rogue obviously could have won. Mad Lions did win. Now this split, your team's doing very well. Misfits is like a revelation. Now no one even knows, by the way. It's not even certain G2 is going to go to Worlds. Like, that's very much on the table. They might not be one on the team that gets the 3 spots? So what do you think about where the league is at the moment? Because obviously the issue is no one really fully knows how legit is your team, how good is Misfits, which of the old teams is still going to be good. Where do you see the league at the moment? Like how much parity is there? Is there like a clear favorite to you?
Well, I would say based off of performances, I would probably say that we look the scariest from outside, just looking at our games, because due to just how the Misfits game like panned out, how we were so far ahead and we just kind of threw it away in the early week. I would say we look the scariest, but in general, I think the field, Mad Lions is in a very strange situation because they had MSI, they had to quarantine. I think they went through some COVID situations too, right? So it's hard to judge due to best of ones. I think they are going to always be dangerous due to how structured they play and how they also align as a team. I think there's like a clear identity there. They figured out how they want to play. I think Rogue as well. I think with the current meta being very similar to what it was last year, it has given teams the opportunity to be it's like you get rewarded for being disciplined, right? And I think this was a very tough thing for both Fnatic and G2 and Spring, where creativity and chaos has been like the thing that they thrive in, and then they pulled all the other teams in the region with them into it, and then they just lost no matter what, right? And now they've played in Spring, they played very disciplined. Coming into summer, I think they're continuing this trend. I think Rogue looks very dangerous in best of ones. I like Mad Lions. I think G2 can bounce back at any moment in time because of the just caliber of their players. Like, it's incredible to me to just read about, like, yeah, these players are washed up now. Like, they've bought enough credit to, int it for maybe 3 more years before I call them washed up. It's just crazy to me that people are so quick to run to judge them. I think they can figure out in a week. When I look at Misfits, honestly, I don't get too excited about them. I think they figured out how they want to play rather early on. I think Razok is performing. I think Hirit is damn good. I think he has this. I believe he went back to Korea and played Korean solo queue, so that's a bit unbalanced. He comes back and he's mechanically talented and he's just destroying everybody in the beginning. I think that's a bit broken. But I think Misfits, I believe the other teams are going to catch up to them. I think they figured out the meta rather fast. They were the forefront of Akali, and they picked up some wins off of luck. And I think that's an element that you need to have to win every best of one. You need a little bit of luck, right? And if I look at the top 4, I would still put us, Rogue, Mad Lions, and G2 at the end of the split in the top 4. But for now, Misfits, I think they have figured out how their bot lane wants to play. I think Hirit and Razork are impressive players, but I think in the end, everyone else will catch up. And in regards to the rest of the field,
before you go on, I also think it's important to mention that in regard to your meta point, it does seem like the meta just fell into VTO's lap overall and really played to his strengths. And so what I want to see is a different kind of meta where VTO maintains this level of performance, because that's my big question mark for them. Anyway, continue.
No, for sure. And in regards to the other teams, I guess it's SK. I think they're it's SK. XO, maybe they will figure something out down the line. It's tough because I know things that I shouldn't say. I like Nuktak. I think Nuktak has been performing well. I think he's dangerous. I think he deserves far more credit than he's receiving. I think he's the best performer on XO. I think it was a positive change for them. Who else is there? Vitality is an interesting team as well. I think they have an awkward way of playing. And I think, that's just the epitome of leader and self-made, right? It's good in a league where teams tend to be similar in some fashion. It's good to be awkward. And I think Vitality is awkward. When you play against them, it's like fighting a southpaw is how I always call it. And it forces you to change, your viewpoint on the game. And I think Vitality in that shape or form is also dangerous. But also I feel in the long run, in the best of 5s, this is not something that will last against some of the higher end teams. Who else is there? Astralis. Yeah. And that's it, I guess.
So I don't know if you saw this already, but there are some changes to the Excel roster that you said you knew things. So it says Mark Noon and Advien will join the LEC team with Dan and Denik.
That's out?
Getting benched.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay.
Was that what you were? I assume that's what you were referring to.
Unless you're baiting me.
I'm not baiting you. Excel announced it. Excel announced it.
Come out earlier today.
As it, I think that's exciting. I think the improvement in jungle, I think is cool. I think that's going to be very good for them.
By the way, what you were just saying there as well, like if that doesn't just show these stupid fans, they've got to stop trying to bury like super sick players after 3 weeks of play. Y'all literally buried Nukeduck and said he should never be allowed to play in LEC again, and that if he's ever hired, they did this, by the way, for real, that it must only be a pure nepotism and that someone hired their friend. Well, guess what? A Young Buck's friend is tearing up half the fucking mid laners in the arse of the league. Are you fucking kidding me? He's better than half the players in the whole league who play mid lane. So in the same scenario, I agree, by the way, on the whole G2 roster. The same G2 that the dumbass fans voted every player was the best in the league at his position at the end of spring split. We've already played 3 weeks of LEC, but they're all washed already. This is how dumb fans are, by the way. I don't really want to be a GM or coach because I know it's like a lifetime gig and you've got to go all in. So I'll never really do it, right? I only ever threaten to do it. But one of the things that makes me want to do it is shit like this, because it makes me want to just go and get like a mid-table team, and I'll take whichever one they kick out of G2. Anyone. They can kick out Mickey. I'll take Reckless. Give me any of them. I'll just build my entire team around them and put the right pieces there, and we'll be one of the best teams in the league. Like, you guys are out your fucking minds, you fans. This is also why fans this is the real irony of fans. Because they're called fans, that comes from Fnatic, you'd think they're the ones who must understand the team the most, the greatness of the team. They never understand the greatness of the team, because the second the team starts losing, the way you can tell they're a child vicariously living through a different avatar character is they just dismiss all the players. So when they were in Fnatic, right, half the Fnatic fans, when they used to lose to G2, were like, oh, kick Hillersign, he's a fucking idiot who just engages where he doesn't even understand. It's like, motherfucker, if he doesn't engage, it doesn't make sense to you. Pause the game and ask yourself why you don't understand why he engaged. That's the way around I'd flip it. So, like, they just love burying great players, mate. I'm so sick of it in this game, because how many times do you have to see them come back? The difference is the other way around. The guy who's good for 2 weeks, no one fucking knows where he'll be in 2 years. A guy who's a legend who has one bad split, I hope I see him in another year, because it could turn it all around.
Also, you're not even mentioning the reaction against new players too. Remember, Misfits had exactly the same roster in spring and failed to make playoffs. And we heard on this show, you guys could go back and watch it with Deficio, his philosophy about how many games you need to play in order to kind of raise yourself up to that LEC level, and how he was playing a long game with some of these players that he thought could develop. So, and also, you're actually ignoring what happened with Misfits, which is that they threw a fuck ton of games last split. Like, they had really sizable advantages in many games, and they completely threw them away. It was heartbreaking in a way, especially with how close they were to making playoffs. They win one of those games, they're likely headed into the playoffs instead, and the narrative is completely different. So the eye test is completely broken with fans, and part of it is best of one just breaks your eye test, like, straight up. It's just fucking horrible for the average person who can't just understand that it was a giant uphill battle, because League of Legends as a game is not designed to be in best of one. And here's the crazy thing. Riot knows this. They know it, because that's why best of fives are standard in every single game that actually fucking matters, guys. It's best of fives every time, because we know that is what is actually proof of a better team, not a best of one.
No, for sure. 100%. It's like best of one. Like, the game is just too chaotic, right? There's just too many variables. Something goes, like, you could screw up a level 1, someone smites your red, and then, like, your game is over, right? Just from that point onward, just your chance of winning the game just decreases by 20% in like a split of the moment decision, and that's just something that happens sometimes in best of ones. And yeah, it's for the upsets, yay! It's for the viewership, woo! Fun. Love it, competitive integrity. I just wanted to add on the topic of just like, because we mentioned Nukta, and we spoke about Nukta, you mentioned Hilly as well. It's just like the whole conversation about rookies and veterans. Like, I've been a pretty big proponent for rookies, right? In my career, like, I went to Splice, and then I brought in Mickey X, and people told me, yeah, Kick Wonder, he's sprinting it. This guy's terrible, because like we were in relegation. And I was like, yeah, this guy's fucking good. Don't worry, guys. Gonna bring in Mickey X, guy I found in solo queue. We're gonna figure it out. And then we went to the World Championship, and I knew like there's a big difference between a good veteran and a bad veteran. Because every rookie that any GM brings in, I feel like that's completely lost. That you're supposed to take a rookie and turn him into a good veteran. Like that's the goal, right? But I feel like that's forgotten.
Yes.
And then you have good veterans that don't get spots, but those are the players that you want your rookies to become.
Yes.
It was crazy and wild to me that a player like Habashad wasn't in LEC.
Mad, isn't it?
So as still.
Yeah, it's mental, right? It's
Kickus as well is another
nuts.
one that's confusing.
It's wild because in the end, these are the players you want the rookies to become. It's like you have a player like Hilly and Whippo. Like Hilly's 26, he's been playing the game at a very high level for a very long time, and he's continuously improving. I've seen improvement between summer and spring. It's not like just because he's 26, he's going to stop improving. I don't think in my day-to-day interactions like this is something a 26-year-old would say, and this is something a 26-year-old would do. I never have that thought in my mind ever. So this like whole topic of age and rookies, just bring in the rookies. It's gonna solve all our problems. It's just
it solves your money
GMs
problems. It solves your money problems, Yamato. That's what it solves.
True, just trap them in a 4-year contract, minimum wage. It's like you get an opportunity to play, and that's happened many times for sure. It's disappointing that GMs in general are often quite terrible.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about SANDBOX and your time there, because I'm curious. We don't have a lot of time, and I'd love to get into the whole Korean thing with you later on. But what did you learn from coaching a Korean team that you now apply to Fnatic? Because you went directly from SANDBOX over to Fnatic right now, and those are two really, really different environments. And you're the only person who's been a coach over, like a coach over in Korea who is from the West. So you have very unique insight.
Well, I realized, like the first thing that I noticed right away was some things that culturally are so just a standard there, right? In terms of how they work, the work ethic, and how they interact with each other. Like a lot of things that I would have to work very hard to put into place in Europe are things that were just there for granted. It's like, there the bar is set for what a player is supposed to do. If you don't succeed, you get like borderline disowned because like you don't succeed in gaming. Like what the fuck are you doing with your time, right? And the standards for what a pro player is and what you need to do has been set, and that came with a lot of ease. The difficulty that I faced was to make the players express themselves. It was very often I paused the game in the middle of like we would review, and in the beginning I was telling them things, and I realized they just followed blindly what I said no matter what, and I was like, this is not going to work, right, in the long run, because whenever the game took a slight turn, we were playing against Damwon, they took a turn, their Pantheon level 2 ganked mid flash and used Ignite, they gave up bot, and it just ruined the whole game because it just ruined the flow of the game. And I realized, these guys need to be able to critically think. So in the beginning I was just reviewing the games, and I just paused the game. I was like, Summit, what do you think about this game state? What do you think should happen? Who is winning? What should happen next? In the beginning, there was just nothing. It's like, I don't know. Nothing. There's no critical, like, active thinking because they were so used to just being told just what to do, right? And in Europe, what I recognize, it's like the grass is greener type of thing. I realize the things that are missing and the things that I should attribute to the situation, and the things that are there that in the past maybe I've taken for granted. Players in Europe tend to be very opinionated. They are very passionate. They want to be involved. They have bigger egos of some sorts, and there's a lot of like cultural clashes because you have one player from Belgium, one player from Turkey, one player from Zimbabwe, whatever country, right? There's a lot of cultural clashes, and I recognize some of the things that I took for granted, and I realize the things that I need to implement to replicate a lot of the good things that are going on in Korea, the discipline, the culture. Because what I loved about Korea the most was just how, the older players took care of the younger players. It's a clear, like, brotherly love. We eat dinner together. We do rock, paper, scissors about who's going to clean up. Just those small little things where you spend time together and you build that bond together is something that I realize is just overpowered. Just as cliche as it sounds and as silly as it sounds, just love, love between one another. I think that goes such a long way, and I think that's what I realize is just this is something that I need to look to try to implement in my teams, that bond, that culture, and I think that was the biggest lesson. I also realized that when I came out of the quarantine, SANDBOX had this issue that the previous head coach kept like swapping players in best of three. It's like, yo, you entered, oh, you get swapped out, you get swapped out, you get swapped out. And in that moment, I just took all my 20 players to the room. I had 5 coaches, 20 players. I was like, I'm going to make a commitment to 5 players. I'm sorry, but this is going to be, the line I'm drawing, because I wanted them to feel that I'm committed to them the same way I want them to be committed to me. And I realized that level of commitment between the players is also super important. Often in Western League of Legends, it's like something goes wrong, and then a player's thoughts, they begin to bite at the back of your brain, and they say, oh, I should join a different team, I should replace this player, I should look to do something else. And I wanted to completely remove those thoughts. I just want true commitment from my players to one another. I want them to feel, oh, in this moment, there's no other player I'm ever going to play with, even though it's not true. Like, off seasons happen, right? But I want them to artificially somehow have that mentality. And those are the things that I recognize. These are super, super important things to make a culture and a team function, for sure.
I always tell people, like, some of the aspects, when you can even tell by the way Westerners ask questions, it's like, look, mate, you have to just go there, because, like, you can't get a sense for what you're asking. Like, half the questions people have about pro gamers practicing starts from the position that, like, someone motivated them to do it. Nobody did. The hack is they are fucking born Korean. Have you ever bothered looking into what Korean culture is like? I used to say this as an example to make it really extreme for people, right? Obviously, in the West, we all understand the idea of having a job that sucks. So you sort of do like the minimum possible, like, obvious example would be, say you're a janitor in a building, like a massive tech corp, right? You're probably just going to push the broom around a bit and then watch on your phone for half an hour, then push the broom a bit more and then go, no one's coming to check, so I'll forget they're in the last room. And, if I don't get fired, my performance. I used to say this, it's not a joke. If you're in like an apartment building in Korean, the fucking guy who literally just sits in the lobby watching the door to see if the right people are coming in, dude, they act as though they were working for like the military or something. They're all like fucking work ethic. Like, this is my job. I have a duty to the people in my community. Like, they have all this shit hooked in that, like, it hasn't been in like Western culture for about 70 years. So, like, unfortunately, the hack isn't like that we can figure out what they're doing. We'd have to like rebuild our whole society, and then as a byproduct, we'd be better at video games. So I don't think that's a realistic scenario that the LCS can solve, boys. I mean,
you have to look towards Korean history too. I mean, this is a country that was literally entirely destroyed in the 1950s, like leveled to the ground, and they rebuilt themselves into a first world country in like 30 years. Okay.
Now, I'm going to say I do have a plan like that could work for America, but you got to listen to me on this one.
Oh boy.
I have to be able to sort of reset the table again, and then from that we will build a new utopia, I call it.
Yeah. And so, and I think you were really on the nose with a lot of what you said there. So the kind of communal feeling, and like you mentioned this bond, there's actually a Korean word for it, which is chung, which is like the sense of duty and friendship that you have to someone is such a deep bond in Korea. It's like, it is a lifelong bond that people form. And so, it's like when your friend that you have chung with gets in trouble, like, you are there 100%, no matter what. And it's not any personal motives that you have, any individual like motives are taken over by your duty to that other person. And so there really isn't a concept of this in Western culture. There really isn't a word for it, but it is insanely deep. Now, the upside is that it leads to these amazing relationships. The downside is that it tends to overtake rules and law at times, which occasionally leads to corruption, which is something you see a lot of times in Korean business dealings. Now, the other aspect of this that you mentioned was kind of the struggle with critical thinking. Korean education is very much about rote memorization, and there have been a lot of criticism about the lack of critical thinking, and there are people within the Korean education system that are trying to really actively change this. But it has been, it is useful in some ways, but it has been kind of a criticism of the way that kids are raised in the education system in Korea, that there isn't enough critical thinking overall. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that sometimes this was an issue, is because they're so used to being told what to do, given a very specific path forward, that they're unused to being asked about reflecting on their own performance very much. So, you kind of hit on like many of the positives, but also some of the negatives, like within your story that are, as Thorin's saying, kind of broadly representative of Korean culture at large and not kind of unique to the esports space, I would say.
No, for sure. It's just like you can see it. I think, as you mentioned, Thorin, you can walk the streets and you feel it. It's definitely just this overpowering sense of the group is more important than the self, and in the context of a team, that's what you want, right? That's truly what you want. And in like on Reddit and so forth, people celebrate the big egos, but in teams, that doesn't function too well. That's where the difficulty comes in, and I think it's kind of broken. It truly is kind of broken that it's just there without like I just came into the team and the energy in the room from 11 to 2 in the night is just that the energy just makes you want to work hard because everyone's working hard. It was like impossible not to work hard in Korea. Here sometimes, sometimes my players goof off and I need to like motivate myself, so I need to catch myself because sometimes I'm starting to make jokes about how we're griefing it in the scrims, and then I catch myself like, we need to get our shit together because these games count. And when we're sitting there playing our last game of the season, we're gonna regret that we didn't put into practice, So I need to catch myself often. But in Korea, it's like the energy in the room just makes you're just in it and you're motivated and you're hungry. And that was also something that I tried to replicate, but it's very, very difficult.
So I know you have a meeting with your team, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, Yamato. But I do have another question for you before you go, which is, what is your current perception on the LCK then? Because you talk about you were there after kind of the era of Korean dominance has ended. You're talking about all these wonderful aspects about being on SANDBOX and kind of the work ethic of the Korean culture. So why do you think, especially now, the LCK teams are having such problems adapting? We've seen some crazy roster moves from the world champions in Damwon recently, but it has been a struggle to remain competitive across the board with the LPL. Even though Damwon won, I think overall the LPL teams were stronger at Worlds last year. Just happened that Damwon was the best team, but they're not the best region on average any longer. So where do you see the flaws right now within the LCK?
So looking back at the previous World Championship, like Genji lost their head coach, which was like they lost their head coach, I believe, after they played the finals, and they lost the finals, which is Coach Edgar, who's done a lot of great shit over in Korea. And then the RX, the whole situation with CV Max, that was also chaotic, right? So I'm taking all of that with like a pinch of salt. But I think what Damwon did, because we got to practice against them, we got to play against them, I recognize that in scrims they started to sprint it. And they just took some inspiration. It's like they're like, let's just add some of the things that some of the other regions are doing that is helping them in the long run. And I was scrimming against Damwon, and most of the time, whenever I was over in Korea boot camping and scrimming against Korean teams, it was structured, it was disciplined, it was like borderline. If these players make a mistake in scrim, they get like whipped almost, It's like I remember when we boot camped with Afrika, it's like Spirit just came over to our room because we were just boot camping with them. It was like, yo, I made a mistake, so I'm benched now. I get subbed out. I was like, Jesus Christ, okay. So it's like they are very, very, thorough with making sure the practice is disciplined and, the approach is good. But I saw with Damwon, what they were doing was they were just testing limits. They were just trying stuff. Noguri was just sprinting it. He was just all inning. And I felt like with this, Damwon found their own sense of creativity of how they wanted to play the game, and they kind of were allowed to express themselves. I think this is something that has been missing. Like if I looked at DRX and Genji, they didn't really express themselves as players. They tried to play the game in a very they tried to really, really like play the game in a structured manner. And whenever it deviated in any shape or form, like when we saw G2 play against Genji just couldn't really like keep up with what G2 was doing, because they were just free flowing. They had like this rhythm to the game that was very unique. And I think this is where the biggest difference maker is for me as well. The second one would be, I think, in terms of how the players are placed among the rosters. It's like you have 2 good players here, 1 good player here, 2 good players here, and it's just weird how the distribution of players has happened. It's like it's not super heavy, but I think you could make a couple of more really insane teams in LCK if you make like proper mixes, and I think that could also go a long way. But I don't know how the contract situation is there, or the money situation is, or what the motivations are. But it's like, when are we going to see Chovy with players that he
in China
seemingly
is the
deserves,
answer. Next year in China.
In China is the answer. Maybe in China, right? I think that's also an issue. Yes.
Yeah, I think I would be shocked if like Showmaker, Canyon, and Chovy were in LCK next year.
Well, the problem I've heard is that basically Chovy sounds like one of those people. It's quite common, unfortunately, in the Korean scene where the people they have as their representative, let's just say, are a fucking bozo that just does all the wrong moves in the off-season every time. So, like, put it this way, it's depressing, but, like, you look at these last 2 teams Chovy's been on where it's like, are you even looking at the roster before you sign on the paper? Mate, you should hear some of the teams he could be in the LPL now and like teams that are at the top of the league. It's fucking depressing. That's the worst thing ever when you find out, because it's not like Western players. The player doesn't just himself go, I decree I will join this team. They listen to other people. Someone's like, I'll take care of the money for you or whatever. They do the deals. Some of these deals, if you look at Chovy's career, it looks like they just do the deal and then the team comes after, like it's just sad because you want to see these players obviously being the best teams. They could be world champions already.
All right. Well, sure. Thank you, Yamato. I wish we could talk more about SANDBOX. We'll get you back on at a different time, hopefully. Congrats on your success with Fnatic. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back on, we'll be here with Revenge. All right, very quick transition here. Thorin does have to leave hard on the hour, so I want to get back as fast as possible. We are now here with Revenge from Immortals, a team on the rise. You guys employed a unique strategy to get to the top. Are you familiar with the actual film Battle Royale? Have you seen it, the Japanese film where the genre name comes from?
No, I haven't.
So first off,
I have not.
Go watch Battle Royale because it's an absolutely sick live-action Japanese movie about a bunch of high schoolers who are forced to kill each other until there's only one left. So super Japanese, super great. The equivalent in the West was Hunger Games, except it's like the shittier version of Battle Royale. But that's where the actual name of the genre comes from. So pretty fun stuff. So you guys took the unique strategy of if you were in the Battle Royale, your opponents just got sad and killed themselves, thereby increasing your ranking simply by staying alive. Not making any kind of roster changes, right? So part of your success, perhaps.
They did have the mid laner technically comment, like they brought in that fucking whatever pretty guy or whatever. So they did one roster move, but not it wasn't at the start player or whatever.
We just wanted to be cool, like we just
a little one.
So you guys have maintained this roster. We did talk to Andre Giotto a little bit earlier this year about kind of his coaching philosophy coming in. Part of it has been you guys really wanted. I respect Andre a lot as a coach, and I think that his technique and his methods with you guys has proven that you guys are improving pretty dramatically. You're certainly in contention for the playoffs right now. You have had you're 7-2 now, I believe. No, what are you? 7-4? Sorry.
7-5.
7-5. 7-5 now.
Thieves,
yes, after you lost 100 Thieves yesterday. So still. Your improvement has been noticeable. So let's start there. What was it after you guys ended your spring split? What was your training like coming into summer, and what were your goals during the kind of period of MSI?
I mean, we knew we had kind of a lack of team identity in a way, or how we wanted to play the game, especially after early game, which is, I think, one of the hardest things to learn as a team, especially when you have so many new players. And part of that was because we didn't really have the off season leading into spring. So like we played lock-in with 3 of our academy players, and then we just like ended up going straight into LCS with like a week of scrims with our main team players. So we kind of had to figure out first like what we are good and bad at as players together on a team, and like just our common strengths and weaknesses, and then like basically make band-aids, because the LCS schedule is literally like 3 scrim days, 3 game days, break day, 3 scrim days, there's really not much room to like make big changes or like figure out what's going wrong with that kind of schedule. So yeah, spring didn't go like best, I would say, for us. Like we thought we could do better, but it is what it is. So we actually started practicing really early in spring, or really early compared to other teams between spring and summer. And a lot of that was Giotto basically making a structure for us to learn the game together in a way, especially outside of early laning and like just the early game. And a lot of that we pretty much were able to like mold a newer team identity and just like understand the game at a deeper level, which is something we were all kind of lacking between or during the spring split. So that was like the biggest thing. Just a longer practice time and just that mold.
Right, one of the things, obviously, that Giotto was able to do when he came over to LCS is it's not like some of the other like imports from Europe where he's come over, he's at a completely, totally new team. All this, he's literally brought over his fucking jungle and support from Europe. He brought over Destiny and Cersei, like players from his former teams. So I'm assuming, in theory, it must have mean he can hit the ground way quicker run in terms of how he wants the team to run. Some maybe the comms setup or something. What's the impact been like of a sort of this 3-man package coming in?
I mean, it's been really interesting because, yeah, Destiny and Xerxes were teammates before, like you said, so they already had some synergy together in a sense on how they wanted to play the game and how they, I guess, like just their knowledge of each other's strengths and weaknesses and how they could play off of it. And that was I would say, pretty useful for us to like have kind of that anchorage, at least when we were entering the team. But I think it's really, at least to me, the way I view it is having like synergy with like 3 people on a team makes like a really big difference. I think 2 people kind of isn't enough because like, for example, like if it's like mid jungle support, that's a core, you know, like that's like
Sure.
really easy to like work off each other for like the whole early game and like just, you know, really speed things up when you're trying to add like a new top laner and AD carry, for example, right? But when it's just like jungle and support, it's like, well, you still have this mid laner that you need to communicate with. You still have this also new AD carry, even top laner, and things can get like really chaotic still. So the synergy that like the jungle and support have might not be enough to like completely dictate everything. And I think that was kind of the case for us. Like we had a lot of new voices on the team with me and like and Insanity, and just figuring out how to mesh with each other kind of took away, I would say, in a sense, from that synergy that maybe Xerxes and Destiny did have. But in a way, now, given the time that we've had working together, we like added onto it. And I think that's like the best part because we are able to actually like figure out now how we can work together. It's really like hard to even be more specific, I guess, because like it is really general. Like there's just so many things that we had to like learn how to work with each other on, and it's been really nice.
So you as a player, like you seem to, when you talk about how you use the off season to kind of forge your team identity, I'm curious what you perceive really changed there, because it seems like the class of champions that you're playing is still pretty similar to what we saw in spring. Like Insanity is generally more of a ranged control mage player overall. You generally take a lot of the carry champs, you know, whatever meta that's going to be in. And Xerxes has been, I would say, pretty active in terms of more farm-oriented junglers, which is still standard in the meta. I guess he's changed a little bit, like playing more Xin Zhao or ganking-oriented junglers so far this split. But what were some of the stylistic changes that you think made a difference for you guys and actually shifted the way that you perceived or played the game?
Well, like I was saying, it's mainly to me how we started playing outside of early game, because I think with what you're saying, with like how I think what you said was like kind of like our preferences and our styles of playing, which is like the strengths of them at least. Like for example, I'm still willing to be on champions like, you know, like enchanters, for example, top lane, even if it's strong with the meta and in our team comp, right? And that's not necessarily like my strongest style, but I'm always willing to be able to show those kind of things. And it doesn't change our team identity though, with how I'm perceiving it, in the sense that like we now know how to play together in mid game to like close out the game as fast as possible and to like actually beat these top teams who have already had this like extra knowledge and expertise from like either just years of playing, like Perks, for example, or like just having a coaching staff who's like, hammering it in them to learn. And I think that to me, at least, is how we've assumed this like newer identity. And it's a lot harder for, I would say, like viewers to see who aren't like paying attention to a lot of the details of what we're doing outside of lane to like actually understand what's working for us. But I think that like that to me has helped level us up as a team the most. And I think in spring, it didn't help that there was a lot of games where we just completely entered the game in the first like 6 or 7 minutes, and it made it really hard for us to even show that we're a good team, to be honest. So that really sucked, and we're trying to not do that. I think it's a little bittersweet for me to say that right now, since that was kind of the case against 100 Thieves, like our last game. But
that was a weird game. To be fair,
I mean, it was, but like regardless, the game kind of ended in like the first 5 minutes, like.
Well, but see, that's my point is that doesn't really show your macro, because everything that happened in that game was like fucked up from minute one. The scenario was very weird.
Yeah, I mean, it sucked. I mean, I want to avoid these kind of games as much as we can. I mean, it's like my biggest. I feel like the most disappointed to losing games like that as a player, because like you said, it doesn't really showcase our strength as a team at all. And it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like what Yamato was saying and what you were saying about like the best of ones. It's like, well, I mean, all right, we lost. Time to go home, like there's not much else we can show. Like something really shit happened early game, and the game is pretty doomed and hard to recover from it. So, we could do our best, but we know that we could show better. And
so I want to use this to talk, because what's interesting about you guys is that this is your second time. You're in the second round robin out of 3 now. So you started that process. You're in your first game of the split. You beat 100 Thieves. So you had this, you took them down. They were still powering up. You're one of the 2 losses that they've had so far this split. Now the second come around, they have gotten a lot better. I would say a lot more diverse in terms of their strategies. And you guys were both trying some interesting things in this game. First off, you were trying Xerxes on Gwen in the jungle. And second off, they were running FBI on Lee Sin with Senna in the bot lane. And this is something that 100 Thieves has started doing, which is, playing the fasting Senna with Ziggs, or with FBI on the Senna, and then Huhi on the Ziggs. Now they're playing FBI on the Lee Sin. What was your expectation for this draft? Because I was really excited at the start of this game, because I was like, fuck yes, finally someone is playing Aurelia into Gnar. Let's go. Let's see this matchup, which is really, really fun to watch from the Aurelia perspective. And then your team I felt really bad for you, because your team kind of threw away any chance that you had to carry through no fault of your own. So I didn't really get to see the matchup overall, right?
Well, yeah, I don't want to like shift response. I mean, we lost as a team, right? Like I think
Sure.
like the whole planning we path bot, and we knew there could be a fight. There was some mismanagement of waves, and it led us to not be able to fight at an even level at that time when the plan.
You're referring to when they did the jungle invade in the bot side, and then you TP'd into the fight. So,
yeah. And I had the agency to TP because I cheater recalled, and like. The reason why in that game, for example, I still had like a really massive CS lead on Gnar was because by TPing on a cheater recall while the wave is slow pushing towards me, if the play is short enough that I TP to, I can go back and now catch like 4 waves, and then Gnar lost like two waves. So like I'm like 2 waves ahead of Gnar, even though he had 2 kills. So like I was kind of on a crutch that game because of that. So I wasn't like completely doomed, but the fact that my laner got 2 kills from that TP is like, wow, like
yeah.
Oof, and aside from that, it's like the jungle situation is also really doomed now too, because Diana's just permanently accelerated for like the whole early game and the rest of the game, right? And these things happen. Like when I say like we lost as a team, it's because like, well, we could have had better planning as a team, and we could have like actually avoided that bot fight in the way it happened, considering what was actually going on in the game and like the variables of the game, right?
It was also just kind of unnecessary, because your win condition you didn't have to take that fight for your win condition to be active, right? Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was completely unnecessary for you guys to choose to fight that. Was kind of my takeaway from that scenario.
It was. I mean, the thing is, like, we're a really confident team, especially with like how we play scrims. And we always tell ourselves that we want to be able to play on stage how we play on scrims, because I think we're a very good scrim team. And we play really aggressive. We take fights that, like, we are willing to take 50-50 fights or even 40-60 fights because we believe in our own mechanical abilities and we believe that we're a good team to like do this. And we want to be able to have this kind of mindset and this kind of play style to be able to actually compete against the top teams, especially in NA. Because I don't think a lot of teams in the league have this kind of mentality, and especially when playing on stage. So while the fight was, as you said, unnecessary, in regards from my perspective, it was still a good fight to take to, like, if we played mechanically well, especially in that fight, we could have actually won that fight. And not only would we win that fight, but their top laner is now out of the game, because by TPing there, he's basically relinquishing a non-cannon wave and the next upcoming cannon wave in his lane, and giving it to either me or my mid laner, who say dies and then could run top and catch it as well, right? Like, considering, depending on how long the fight is. So I like the play from my perspective as a carry to TP there was like very still like good. The result just turned out to be like the worst possible thing it could have been. So yeah, it did suck. It was like a huge pain to me because Aurelia is like one of my best champions, and I think that given a more even game state, I would have smashed that lane into oblivion. Like, I could not I could not believe it. But but like I mean, you know, chances are chances, and I'm sure more will come where I'll
What
be
do
in
you
that
actually
position.
think, by the way,
So,
about like the strength of like where you are in the top lane mix in LCS? Because in years gone by, top lane actually was one of the roles people used to sort of laugh at in LCS. Like, it just was nowhere comparable to, nowhere the Asian regions, and even I thought LEC used to have better. I think if you look now, you can make an argument top lane. I think top lane jungle are the most stacked in LCS. Like, almost every team has a good player or name player or player who's either in his prime now or was a great player in the past years. Where do you think you fit among the top lane hierarchy?
well, to go off what you initially just said, yeah, I definitely think top lane in NA is really stacked, and I've been saying that since like even before the split began, because I knew Fudge, for example, was a promising rookie in academy, and I knew like this guy was going to be good and is going to compete with like the top dogs, like, you know, Impact someday or whatever, right? So like I knew that like Fudge is going to be one of those players that will surprise people, and I knew myself was going to be another player that will surprise people. So like in my head, I knew top lane was going to be stacked in NA, or is stacked in NA. And to be honest, like, it's a biased answer, but I know that I can compete with everyone right now in top lane, and it's just it does suck to say, but like I think the way I view top lane is like, yeah, you know, you can have these individual things like laning, for example, that you can look at and say, okay, like this guy's a good laner, and he can individually, he's going to be good in that sense. But there's so much that a top laner can do for a team that you don't know, and that can actually make him a very good player. Take like Impact, for example, and how he's like managing his waves or even his comms with his team, that we just like as a viewer can't really understand. But so like when I speak about myself right now, ranking above amongst all the top laners, I think that laning, I can lane and beat everyone, and I've even shown that this split, or just, you know, and last, like between the two splits, I've now shown that. And I think when it comes to my team play, I'm also still learning a lot, but I think that I'm learning so fast that but like I can also be someone who's considered at the top as well. And I mean, I need to just show that, and I think that the best way I can show that is winning with my team. So um I think it'll definitely take some time as a newer player to do that. So
Well, I
yeah.
think too, what's interesting about you as a player is that this is your first, I mean, this is your rookie year within LCS, and so how do you think, in terms of rookie development, how do you think that you kind of took yourself up to the LCS level coming off of FlyQuest Academy? What has your progression been? Do you feel like you were overlooked for a long time, or do you feel that you've had a noticeable improvement to kind of put you in the conversation? Because it's rare to have, I think, an NA mid laner that is able to keep up.
You mean top laner or were you
top
saying,
laner?
like-
Yes, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just brain fire.
I brain fart. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I was in FlyQuest Academy compared to now is like not even really remotely comparable. Like there's just so much that I learned at an accelerated rate when being put under like the expectations of like you're an LCS player now and you need to know these things, and a lot of that was thanks to the coaching that I got, and also just my eagerness to like want to learn and be a top player. And I think that when I say I was able to show like my laning prowess like between the two splits, like I there's like a lot of, like for example, my debut game against Alphari, it was a YamatoCannon game, and yeah, I mean it is a very Aurelia sided matchup, but the fact that like before that game no one would bet on me from this FlyQuest Academy top laner from the year before to be able to solo kill Alphari or even just win lane against Alphari, right? So I think that like to me that was a good game to show people like, yeah, I've not the same player I was in Academy, and I'm someone that you can't really like underestimate. And throughout the split I did also show that, and especially I'd say this split now I'm showing that a lot more too. So it's just a matter of, when I say it takes time to like prove yourself as a player, especially as a top laner, there's a lot of like, I mean, there's just so many things that I feel like need to do as a rookie to like really gain people's respect, and also just like the community's, eyes, I guess, to like be watching you and like supporting you, because like, you might get solo killed one game, right? But you also might in a different game solo kill someone 2 or 3 times. Like you never really like, and then like what do you say, right? Like how do you like actually critically think about that player and what they're providing for their team outside of like just their laning, because that to me has like always been the hardest thing to like to actually judge someone as a like a viewer, because I used to be a viewer, a non-pro player, and all you can really judge someone for is their laning and team fighting, I guess, right? But it's like there's so much more intricate things that a player can do that it's really hard for a viewer to judge. So I think that that's always going to be a challenge when looking at criticizing other players and ranking them.
You said that you had the expectations of being an LCS player really forced you to learn quickly. What are some of the biggest points of improvement that you felt over this year?
It was definitely mainly my wave management, my early laning, and how I perceive what I'm doing on my wave to how it's impacting the rest of the map and vice versa. So like, I realize I have the autonomy to do a lot for the game that I didn't actually realize before because of autopilot. Like there's so much autopilot that you bring from solo queue and even academy when you're not really coached. So like you go in with this autopilot and then all of a sudden you're realizing when you get to review like, wait, I might have actually screwed over my team doing this, but it took like my coaches to actually really point it out and like show me how these small things I'm doing is actually like ruining the game, for example, or like on the flip side, like helping the game, because like the way I was playing was so instinctually and just autopilot that there's just so many things I was doing wrong when it came to like how I was managing my waves. Like the biggest difference between me now and before is that like whenever there's a wave, I mean, even when a wave has not even arrived yet, I'm thinking like 2 or 3 waves in advance compared to before where I'm just not thinking any wave. I'm not even thinking about the wave that I'm touching, It's like now I'm thinking a minute and a half in advance versus just not really thinking at all. And like that's kind of like the biggest difference. And then when you do that and you begin to like actually realize you can dictate the game, there's like all these small things that you can actually do, right? Like if I'm thinking a minute and a half in advance, then I'm actually going to now also try to think about how, like what's impacting the rest of my team in that minute and a half, so I can then make judgments on what to do. So like, I'll take an example. Like I know that in a minute and a half, I'm going to have TP advantage on my laner because he's chunked, and I'm in my matchup. I know that I have like permanent prio, so like I can constantly push. So I can then look at the rest of my map and see like scuttle spawning in a minute, and I could say, okay, you guys should take a bot fight in this time upcoming because I want to teleport there. we will win that fight because I will be there first, right? And that's like planning in like a minute and a half in advance. And like that kind of skill is what would really separate, to me, like bad top laners and good top laners, because and that it's something that viewers can't really see, because what a viewer would just see is just, oh my god, like I'm TPing in, and but for example, maybe Destiny had this really smurf flash hook in the river, you know? So that's obviously going to be like the eye highlight for the players, like holy shit, like Destiny got the flash hook, like we're engaging. But the reality is like Destiny might instantly have died after that flash hook, but we just aced their whole team, you know? Right? And the reason we aced their whole team is because of all this planning that we have, whether it's from top lane or mid lane, right? Like generally this is like planning from solo lanes happening. So like that's what I consider like something that would make a top player. It's a very specific example, but like, yeah.
Of course. I mean, what I find disturbing is that the implication is that you didn't know you had about this or weren't thinking about it because of coaching issues in academy before you get to LCS, which just makes it sound like the coaching pipeline just isn't there, or the training pipeline just isn't there to prepare you for real professional play. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
It's fair. It's gotten better, I've heard, though. I think I was a little unlucky with my circumstances, but it wasn't bad for everyone. And I'd say this recent year, it's definitely gotten a lot better. I think the last time I was on the Crackdown, I was like really harsh about the academy system and stuff like that. And I was speaking from my time in academy and from my experience, and people would kind of use it as this like whole umbrella to shit on academy. Like I'd occasionally see these like comments from the community about it, like, oh yeah, well, Revenge said this on the Crackdown, like he was an academy player and he said academy is just useless, you know? And it was for me, you know? I in my circumstances, it was not the best. And I do think that there are teams, for example, like TSM Academy, C9 Academy, I believe, at least in the year I was playing. So this is when like Fudge was on C9. I believe Treats and Lost were on TSM Academy. Like they had coaching staff who were really helping them out and helping them actually like get good at the game. And some of the stuff I was explaining to you about waves and, you know, these things were actually being taught to them. Whereas I was going into these academy games against them having no idea what's going on. Like, I mean, not no idea what's going on, but like I didn't have like this way to win the game myself. I didn't know how to carry the game myself through my like planning and laning and wave management. Whereas, you know, Fudge did, right? Like Fudge and Academy did. And yeah, Fudge Factor, LS Fudge Factor. Fudge has said on record he never received any help prior to this year. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if you're trolling, but at least in my case, yeah, it was kind of like entering Spring Split was like the first time I was receiving like my first ever real coaching, and it was like crazy.
So let's talk about some of the other teams in the LCS, because as we discussed with your game against 100 Thieves, they've really diversified in terms of their strategies, and they're capable of running some really, I think, innovative and unusual things. And not only are they playing to their strengths, even sort of outside of the meta, which is kind of what we're seeing with Abadage, obviously a fantastic Azir player, playing Azir in a time where Azir may not be considered a top pick. But also just we referred to kind of the way they're playing Fasting Senna right now, either with Ziggs or with Lee Sin, which are two extremely different ways to play out the game. So it seems like they have such insane versatility right now. They're really incredibly dominant. And what is your perception of playing against these guys versus the teams that you played against last spring? Because it really seems like they are right now kind of the peak of LCS play that we've seen so far this year.
Man, I don't know, this might sound like a really cocky answer, but I actually just don't think that there's any team in NA right now that's like so far ahead of anyone else, including ourselves, right? Like, I think there's definitely bottom teams in NA, but there's like, including 100 Thieves, I don't think they're like really far ahead of everyone else. I think they're making still like many uncharacteristic mistakes of what I would consider like a very top team. And I think that they're not unbeatable. I just think that everyone else, including our game versus them,
I mean, you beat
is
them, so
pretty-
clearly they're not.
well, we're pretty bad. Like everyone else is actually at a pretty bad level. And like I like for our game, for example, like, and we talked about it, but like we're bad. Like we were terrible that game. Like if it wasn't 100 Thieves that beat us that game, it should have been like GGS or CLG. Like if we're gonna int early game like that, I mean, we deserve to have lost to any team. I mean, maybe CLG would have made more or GGS would have made like more mistakes after that and still somehow lost the game. But I feel like my point is that I don't think that 100 Thieves is so far ahead of anyone else right now. I do agree that like Abedage's upgrade to the team is pretty massive. Just having someone stable who can play a lot of things.
Yes, literally anybody would have been an upgrade, sure.
I mean, okay, I don't even want to be toxic, but like it's just he's an EU. He was like a top 4 EU mid laner. He's coming into NA with like all this knowledge, all of this, just good stuff for the team. Of course, they're going to be better, but I just feel like as a team, they are not unbeatable. They're not doing things that I think are like, wow, like this team can't be stopped. Like the team, like for example, I think the only time that's happened recently was like Spring Split C9 2019, I believe. That was like to me the most dominant.
2020.
Or sorry, 2020. Yeah. That was to me like the first time that I've ever watched League, or like in the recent years that I was watching and even involved in League, where I'm like, wow, like okay, this team's doing something like this. They're actually unbeatable, or pretty unbeatable. Like that, I think there's not been a team like that since right now, including even right now. So we want to get there. We're doing everything we can to get there. I think that it's possible. Still, like I think the league is way closer than like than it's ever been, and I still wondering if that's a good or bad thing. Because
how much of that is like obviously Dignitas making mid lane changes and now kicking Dardoch from the roster? How much of it is the changes that happened with C9 or Alphari being benched and Santorin being out? Like I understand your point, but it does seem like there are a lot of, I would say, negative roster moves that have been made, or experimentation with bringing up academy players into the main roster, for example, as well. Because there are so many factors that it's really hard to get a read on the scene right now, because teams appear to be hurting themselves actively.
Yeah, I mean, teams are definitely imploding. I think you were like kind of saying it at the start, how we're like one of the teams that aren't imploding. Thankfully. I honestly don't know. It's like completely mind blowing to me. Like when you look at the Zven benching, for example, to me that was like the crazy. Like I actually like couldn't believe it.
His performance at MSI was very good.
I don't know. Like he had to have. I mean, I have some insight, but it's like the fact that it's not performance related. Same with
or
Alphari.
Motivation related.
Yeah, or motivation related.
You could do the math, guys, on the rest of it.
It's just a failure. It's just a blatant failure on coaching stuff. Like there's not much. There's just not much more you can say. Like, okay, like it's no surprise. Like Jatt resigned or something, right? Like, I mean, there's the answer to that, right? Like, there's just straight up incompetence or failure from coaching if you're benching these kind of caliber of players. And you look at the Alphari situation, for example, and this is no disrespect to Jenkins. I think he's playing really well, and he's playing at an LCS level. Yeah, but he's not Alphari. I mean,
of course not.
I don't know, if you're a Liquid fan and you see that, I would be the disrespect. Like I can't even just the disrespect to Alphari is like absolutely unbelievable to me, because like considering his performance in spring, like holy, I don't know. I mean, that it's just mind blowing to me. It's just seems like it's an NA thing as well that's completely out of control right now. So I hope that we get it together as a region and stop it. The whole Dardoch situation, a bit more understandable, I guess, when you look at his track record, right? But still, like the fact that Dig was doing well in spring is like a miracle in itself. So,
Dude,
that's
that's
not
what I
much
think's
chance.
dirty about the Dardoch move. I'll tell everyone right now, because I've seen this happen with a lot with players like that. Forgiven was another one in Europe. When you have the rep, right, that you're always the troublemaker, right? Why would anyone sign you if you're a troublemaker? It doesn't make sense. Also, you notice they never kick you at the beginning. What they do is this revenge. When you win them games, suddenly they can deal with it. As soon as the team hits a skid and starts losing, say 2 out of 4 games, 3 out of 4 games, that's when they kick you. Because what they do is that's called scapegoat. And it's like, right, so this guy, if he was causing problems, that's where he was probably causing some level of problems the whole time. It's just who he is as a fucking person. It's not problems. It's the problem is he exists. And if you want him to exist in the same room as you will have to comprehend the way he exists. Now, nobody again can recreate all the universe or Dardoch's entire childhood life to now to make him play jungle 4% better. So you just deal with it, right? If you're on a team like Dig, you go, well, I can't get like the best jungler. So fuck it. Dardoch's a high variance player. If I get a couple of good games, we win the game straight up. It's going to be bad games. I'm going to have to deal with that. Probably going to have to put on my coaching staff. Instead, what they did here was they were fine to take all those wins when he was probably being the same kind of person. But the second they lost a few games, it's like, all right, let's all just cleanse the negative psychic aura around this team by sacrificing the life of Dardoch as a pro player. Again, everyone, shame. Everyone, do the chant, shame, as he like exits the building. And then somehow that's supposed to just like rebirth, born anew, like the fucking phoenix, as it were. And suddenly the team's going to be amazing. I don't think so. Dignitas is going to be fucking garbo. I hope they make the playoffs just get spanked in the first round every other fucking year.
I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think that's the funny thing about this whole situation is like a person like Dardoch, of course, when you start to lose a few games, is going to be, he's going to be even more Dardoch, right? And so, but the problem is that you already signed the Dardoch pact, which is like, he's going to win you more games probably than he loses you games. And so as soon as you build yourselves around, I think Dignitas overperformed based on their roster in the spring split. In fact, Thorin, when we were doing that preview a few weeks ago, I said, I firmly expect Dignitas to be a lot worse and for Immortals to take their place. But the whole thing about this narrative is like, as soon as you kicked Dardoch, you kicked the upside of your team. It doesn't get better than what you already had. What you already had, Dignitas, was the peak possibility of that roster, right? And you just have to understand that that's exactly what you signed up for. Everybody knows who understands this scene that this is the pact you made, and you just have to ride or die by it. And so they chose die. I would choose ride, at least till the end of the year, but they chose die.
And also, just think it through. Like, here's even a tactical reason you don't kick him, because you already have had like most of a year. He's already, as we said, a win condition when he's in his shit together. Thirdly, even more genius is you want to get to the end of the year and just choose not to sign him again. You sign a different person and you hope some other LCS owner fucking signs him, and then he's their problem to deal with.
Yes.
That's tactics. That's gamesmanship. Exactly. That's Machiavelli. Get it on my level, motherfuckers. I'm having coaches fired. I'll have you fired next GM of Dignitas. Watch your fucking ass, mate. Hit me up, GM. Dardoch, you know the number, baby. Hit the line.
I think most. Okay, the only thing I'll say to the point about Dignitas in general and this whole writing it out with him is whether or not the rest of the players could handle it. And
it doesn't matter. You're not going to keep the rest of the players.
It shouldn't.
No, in Revenge, in this specific instance, it doesn't matter because none of the rest of their players are star level LCS players. So what do you gain by getting rid of Dardoch, right? It's like you could get more wins with Dardoch and then maybe, get some more players to be a competitive team. The fact is that you are basically kicking your win condition and there isn't anything else left to get you wins. That's the issue here, is that you're not saying I'm playing a long game because I want to keep this star player happy. It's I am dismantling this team in a way that is going to be really difficult to overcome with roster changes after this year.
Well, when I said like when you look at the rest of their players, I mean it comes to like as well as like a personality thing as well as a like what you can handle as a team too. Like I think like every team needs to have someone who's kind of like, I want to say really confident or really aggressive in a way too, because every good team should have somebody like that. Like. And as a fan, you don't really know who those kind of players are unless they're like, say like Dardoch or they're getting benched or something, right? But I think like as a coaching staff, when you have teams with those kind of players, and you look at EU too, right, with this kind of thing, because in EU, I think a lot of these players do exist. I think Yamato was talking about it too, how like there's this like cultural difference in this personality clash that happens. Well, in NA, I think it's really, especially a team full of, I mean, Dig is 5 NA players. There's not much you can actually like. I think clashing in a team like that is really hard for them to handle. And this is just speculation from me. I don't know many of the players on Dig personally, and I don't know how they can handle the conflict that Dardoch brought or what kind of conflict Dardoch was bringing. But I definitely know he would be the one to bring about that conflict that I think is actually good for a team to have. I think that what failed was how they cultivated that aggression and that conflict in the team and how they dealt with it and just, used it to their advantage. Because I'll tell you right now, in IMT, we have plenty of that. I mean, there's been arguments that we have had together as players on our team that if it happened on another NA team, one of us probably would have been benched, or like our team would have imploded. But we have a good coaching staff to deal with that, and we have a bond as players together that we don't let these kind of arguments destroy us. Like, we know that we just want to win, and we know that we just care about winning. So like, I think that you really need to have that on a team if you want to improve. In every, like, it's just, it has to be there. And I think Dardoch had it, and I just don't know if the rest of the team and the coaching staff used it to their advantage, rather they just let it be a disadvantage.
And I think, to compare my previous point about Dignitas with you guys, is it's like, you guys still have star capability. Like, I would say you're I think you're a much better player than Fake God, for example. I think if you look at Xerxes right now, he's an MVP candidate for this split, frankly. Like, he's been incredible. I think he has like a 7 KDA and like 70% kill participation right now. He is doing extremely well. And has been such a great point of strength for you guys. So like, I just see a lot higher upside. But if you're Dignitas, like, I just don't understand what the identity of Dignitas is supposed to be as a team, because it was, let's play around Dardoch's strengths and his play style, and now it's nothing. And what is the plan for the future? Like you say, you're right, they're an all NA roster. They don't have any imports. They could have if they had kicked Dardoch at the end of spring, they could have imported a jungler for summer. That was an option that they could have taken, right? And so but instead they wait for a few more weeks. Here we are in summer. Now it's too late to do any of that. You're playing the Yusui Soligo musical chairs. Neither of these guys is ever probably going to be a top mid laner within the region. Is Dignitas committing themselves to being like the American team that's always going to have 5 NA players? Is that supposed to be their identity? Or is this, it just doesn't seem like they're making any kind of decisions that lead down a road to a rational result.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool that they were a team of 5 NA players and they did as well as they did in spring, to be honest. I thought it was like, hey, like...
Me too, but that hasn't been their messaging, right? They could say... Here's what's so weird. They have a chance right now to come out and say, we are committing to being an NA-only team. But the fact that they haven't done that means that they themselves are not thinking that, and they haven't even taken up that branding, which leads me to believe that they don't really have a plan right now. Right?
Hard to say. Like, I think that if I was Dig, I'd look and think, well, we have these rookies like Fake God and Neo, and then they have these veterans in Dardoch and Afro, and Soligo as well. So you can count Soligo as a rookie with Fake God and Neo too. And then you have the veterans of Dardoch and Afro, and these two people need to be like the stable points of the team, and they need to develop their rookie pieces. Like, I could see that being their plan, and I just don't know. I mean, it just doesn't really make sense to me when they were getting results with it though, and they like are now like taking this risk and this gamble of like putting in Acadian and even Yusui, to be honest. I think part of me was I was actually really bothered when Soligo first got benched. I mean, I know there had to have been reasons, right? Like internal reasons for it. Like, I'm sure there was like a champ pool argument. I'm sure there was like I don't know. There had to be something deeper, but it was just disappointing to me, because if they're actually a team that wants to develop talent and like, build up their rookies, to bench Saligo when their results were fine, to me was like really, really ridiculous. Like, you might as well die by your rookie too, like you're cultivating your rookie. You have to give them the space to like
look at Misfits. Look at Misfits.
Like I mean, yeah, look at Misfits. I mean, look at me too, for example. I inted some games of Spring Split, and my coaching staff was fuming about it, but like they stood by me, right? Like, and I carried games too. But like and look at Caps. Like you look at Caps too, like the whole Caps and Craps thing, like Claps and Craps. Like, this guy inted plenty of games for his team before he became this like star player. Like, and there's a lot of EU players you can say this about. I don't have like the full knowledge. I mean, Gihoto has told me like a lot of anecdotes and stories about it in the past, so I could say it's the case. But I just think that an NA, when your rookies are inting or like not playing at the level you want them to play, the instant like knee-jerk reaction is like, maybe we have to bench them, or like maybe they're not that good, or like maybe we don't believe in them, or maybe we just like replace them with an import or something. And that to me has always been like the problem of developing talent in NA.
Also, I've got to say this, like, when we keep using that fucking Orwellian term, developing talent, I only use it when you're actually doing it. When you're taking a young player you consider to have talent, ergo one day you think they might be good enough to play for your team or an LCS level team. You actually try to work on their skill set, maybe with their academy coach, put them in the structure, maybe you give them the odd scrim in the main team. And then when there's an appropriate moment, when the veteran or the big name on the main LCS team is literally failing, you replace them because they've been playing well enough in academy, they deserve a spot. That isn't what's happening in 99% of these cases. Like the Dig examples we're using right now, how did you develop Acadian? By just watching him play for every other fucking LCS team and fail, and then not be on a team. Therefore, he has to literally play an academy in your team where you even don't want him, and are choosing people are the dog that's bit 50 other owners before, but you go, it's okay, he won't bite me. Shit, he's bitten me, right? Get the other dog that I keep in the fucking attic eating fish heads, bring that cunt down, pretend he's my little pretty princess. Oh, you're going to win the LCS for me now, aren't you? No, you haven't developed anything about Acadian. All you've developed is this guy into some sort of fucked up relationship with LCS teams where he can't stop getting abused and hurt by them, even though none of them want him. I don't know what the deal is here. Yasui, is he you've been developing? By what? Going back in time in a time machine half a fucking decade and getting him when he was actually an up-and-coming player? What's he been developing? A fucking seriously antisocial life playing solo queue and praying he gets an LCS one day. And what got him in LCS? Was it hard work? Was he showing great potential? Did he master? No, Saligo just didn't play very well. Well, fuck my life. That's how I got into LCS after all that, was it? Just Saligo had to not be very good for 3 weeks. These aren't developed players, guys. Like, here's the thing. At least on the King and the Jenkins album, they actually sound like they had some potential. They were doing some things. They maybe deserved a shot. Maybe not on those teams. They maybe deserved a shot, on a lower team next split or something. But like some players can buy your development talent. Sometimes it's just an excuse for bad roster management as well. And here's sometimes that.
It's not even just about the veterans, Thorin. The other lie about developing talent is that they simply just want to pay people less to be an LCS. So
save money as well. Yeah. We're not going to win this league, so shut it down.
It can be shorthand for kind of mismanaging a roster, but it can also be shorthand for literally just needing someone in a league, not even just LCS, by the way, in a league, and you want to pay them less than veteran starter players who are objectively probably going to be better. And not only that, but when they say developing too, developing actually has to mean developing. Like, are you sending your academy players to Korea or Europe to actually train during the off season? Because remember, we brought this up before, but the biggest fallacy of academy and developing is that academy only runs for about 5-6 months of the year, Revenge, right? For me, it's what are you doing with your players outside of those 5 to 6 months? That is the first question you should be asking. Because if the answer isn't, we're sending them into a better region with better solo queue and possible scrims to develop. This is what I always wonder. Like, you have an opportunity to go where the international events are. You can go to Korea during this Worlds, for example, with your academy rosters. And guess what? you're going to get scrims, because those LPL and LCK teams that aren't at Worlds, I promise you, will be practicing during those periods, because they always do. They always do. And guess what? You're a valuable practice partner for teams at Worlds because you're not in Worlds. Even if you're just there during the play-ins, right? You're still on par with many of those teams. Just go over there, practice. Like, that's the meaning of developing these rosters, is to actually have coaching staffs that are capable, and that you're investing in the future talent by sending them into places where they can get better practice. So that is what developing talent means, not I want to sign a player for cheaper, or I have made this terrible error in managing my roster or my players' attitudes. And so here's a chance to develop this player, especially when they're known quantities. Like, it's not like we haven't seen many of these people before.
No, I completely agree. I mean, when I said earlier, you look at teams like TSM and C9 and why I think they're like developing players better, so to speak. And it's mainly because, like, well, these teams in like the last 3 years or so have gone to Worlds more than any other teams. And oftentimes they take like a chunk of their academy players with them, sometimes all of their academy players with them, and they just play solo queue in whatever region they're in. And I think that that is like one of the most, I mean, it is pretty undervalued, but like solo queue in another region for like a month is crazy good improvement compared to playing in NA for a month. And I mean, I was going to like this last offseason when I was on FlyQuest still, and I didn't know what my future was with FlyQuest. I didn't know what my future was with anyone. I was pretty much like, okay, well, I'm going to hit rank 1 in NA, and then I'm going to get a flight to Korea pretty much ASAP and go play in Korea until either like I know that I'm staying on FlyQuest or another team picks me up. And I mean, Immortals reached out to me around that time, and that is when I got picked up into Immortals. But I was like in contact with people. I was pretty much ready with a plan to like stay in Korea for like 3 or 4 weeks. It was definitely complicated because of the whole COVID situation at that time. It's like in November, but I mean, I knew that like I needed something extra to improve at a faster level in some way to be able to like really get to the level I wanted to be at and compete in LCS. Because I mean, I played in academy for a year, and just the thought of playing in academy again was like, wow. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, I was willing to do it, but I was committed for it to be my last year. Like, I would not play in academy for a year after that. Like 3 years of academy. I mean, I might as well just start writing my will at that point. Like, I mean, it's like,
that's smart.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's. I mean, but some players do it. It's terrible. I mean, it would be terrible. I think like. I mean, at some point you are kind of accepting that you're just a player who is getting paid to play League of Legends, and you know you're taking an academy salary and you're enjoying life here in LA, and that's fine. I can, to some extent, I can respect that, but it's not what I wanted to do. It's not what I left like school to do. It's not the passion I had. Like, my passion is like to be a top competitor, not to like just play video games and live my passion and my hobby. Like that's not what I like came here to do. It's never what was like my intent or like my just.
Well, there's no point in doing that, because at the end of the day, if you're just going to be a middling player and enjoying your life right now, you're losing so much time that you could use for the rest of your life to be on top of another discipline, right? Yeah. So like, what the fuck is the point of doing that? As opposed to if you grind it out and you can reach that kind of top status, it makes sense to stick around for monetary reasons, but also because you're at the top of your field in the time where it matters, right? As opposed to losing time of being at the top of a different field to be middling in the one you are in, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but from like a player perspective, sometimes it is hard to like see that and even like let go of like what you can be, or yeah. I mean, you know, you might know. So I mean, I think like that's why I don't judge, or I don't. Like I said when speaking about this that I respect it, or like I understand it, because like, you know, everyone's different, and everyone's like mentality of their career and like what they can and can't do and what they want to do in the future is just different. So like, from like speaking for myself, like I'm very ambitious and I don't like to waste my time. So like I don't even want to. Like, it's why I didn't get into esports when I was 17. You know, like I had that chance to join. It was literally Immortals when I was 17, and I was like. They're giving me a pretty garbage salary and it's a complete risk of my life. Like, imagine I go do this for a year and I just get kicked. Well, all right, well, there goes my scholarships for university. There goes my year of university of being on track with like all of like my peers and people that I was, you know, just acquainted with at the time. Like, I'm wasting my life doing this. Like, it was if I did not go into league and get far in league, I would have considered it a waste of my life. And to me back then, it was like a complete coin flip. Like, how could I as a 17-year-old put the responsibility of my life to some of these coaching staffs and like like these talent development, you know, staff people, like back then when I was like, this was like 5 years ago. It was like, it would have been so ridiculous. I think that I got a really lucky opportunity with Immortals in a sense of like the staff that I've gotten to like care for me, but like it was like to me back then as a 17-year-old, it was a complete flip. I think like it's always fun for me to like reminisce and think like, oh, what if I did, you know, like what if I did join when I was like 17 and like the rank 1 prospect back then, and like, you know, I say like I had like, you know, some of these top teams reaching out to me, like really giving me laid out plans to develop me and like, you know, telling me what they want to do to make me like a top player as fast as possible, guarantees, you know. I mean, I didn't receive any of these things back then, but I think now a lot of these like 17-year-old, 18-year-old like prospects can receive these things. So it does make me a bit more hopeful for them. But when thinking of myself, it does kind of suck. I mean, it does, you know, leave like a what if in my head, but it's why I care so much about like the scene being, you know, good for these newer players, because like I hope no one really has to like, I guess I hope people don't have to go through like what I went through or think about what the things I was thinking about when I was 17, you know, to like have this chance to play video games, but then like just realize like, my life could be getting ruined, so I'm not going to do it, you know.
It's okay. None of us in any aspect of esports ever wants anyone else to have to go through what we went through in the development of this scene, because it trust me when I say, Thorin can back us up, it hasn't just been butt cheeks for players, it's been butt cheeks for all of us pretty much. We're trying to be here to change things for the better for the future, so that other people don't have to suffer through the various corruptions and scandals and miseries and incompetence that we all have had to live. So, Thorin, I believe you have to leave at this point in time. So we will go ahead and wrap up there. Thanks, Revenge, for coming on. Appreciate your time on this.
Yep.
Great to have you talking about classic Summoning Insight sudden ending. So we are going to do viewer questions now. If you guys want to have your questions answered, go to the Insight on Esports Discord and sign up. Buy yourself some 25 Grog coins, link your account. It's in the pinned tweet for Grog coin. And we're going to start with some of the ones that were saved from last time, which we promised to do. So here we go. TSM is currently top of the table with a roster of exactly 0 stars and no less than 2 check stealers. If they finish top 3 in the LCS this split, do we have to start evaluating Bjerg as a top coach in the league, or would he merely be a benefactor of the troubles other top teams are facing? Look,
Why did he answer his own question?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem.
He knows what he wants us to say.
You know what's up, motherfucker. I know, you know what's up. It's too obvious, wasn't it?
Look, it's hard to say when other teams are actively sabotaging themselves how good TSM actually is. 2 of the top stars in the LCS on the 2 teams in the finals were in some sort of mode of self-sabotage. So I don't know how to answer that. Should TSM be a top 2 team? No, they should not be. Should Huni be a potential MVP candidate, which he kind of is right now? Probably not. You know, and it's hard to say that they have a lot of competition outside of 100 Thieves. Straight up right now, they are a better team than anyone but 100 Thieves is, because Immortals is another team that is not as good as them, but has also maintained their performance, whereas any potential challenges from Cloud9, from Liquid, from Dignitas have all lost major players. Now, we can hope Cloud9 is going to bounce back with Zven on the roster, but I don't think I don't think King was the biggest problem on that team. So yes. they have a some sort of synergy / teamwork problem that they're going through / individual performance problem. And I think King and Zven are, you know, King was fine, guys. Was he as good as Zven? No. But also, like, that substitution is not going to cause Cloud9 to come back to the top at this point.
I mean, what it would have to do with Bjergsen, I don't even know where. That sounds like the non sequitur part of it. Like, if TSM gets wins when the other teams intentionally put worse players, not even LCS level, into the game and they lose the game, ergo Bjergsen is God? Like, what?
Okay.
All right. I mean, listen, I know fans want that. All I'll say is this. How pathetic must Bjergsen and TSM be if this is where you guys are proud? What about winning a couple of best of ones at the beginning of a summer when everyone else gets benched? And again, like, I always said this, right? This is what makes me different from other people, right? I'll give you an example. So in CSGO right now, the best player in the game plays on one of the most flawed teams, one of the top teams, Na'Vi and Simple, right? I don't want him to get a better team, because by definition, he wouldn't be able to play as well. He wouldn't be stuck in like 1v4s all the time. He wouldn't have halves where the game's definitely going to be lost and he has to literally be a Superman and play twice as good as anyone else. So like, in a fucked up sense, I want it to be as hard as possible because that will actually forge the greatest player. Why people want to like win and then have it be easy, I'll never get that. You're just a loser in life if you want that. What that suggests to me is, you know, on some fundamental level, you could never win in anything difficult. So you want even your vicarious star to just win by his defense, just carrying the whole game, whatever. Sorry, I just went off into something for a second. You get the premise.
All right, I'm going to roll these two questions into one, which is, you guys asked the most loaded questions. Which is the deadlier fall, jumping from the top of the Burj Khalifa, which I think was named the Burj Dubai. I think they changed the name, which is the tallest building in the world in Dubai, to the street below, or jumping from Jatt's ego to TL Summer's results without Alphari, which is harsh, very harsh on Jatt. I don't think Jatt's a bad guy. So I'm going to take the Burj Dubai. So the follow-up question to this, there's been a lot of drama regarding the Alphari benching. Can you explain why Zven getting benched isn't nearly getting the attention as we also had the Max Waldo clip, which was with me asking the question, and Max Waldo saying he didn't think he was going to be back during summer. That was not true, apparently. Saying he probably wouldn't play the entire summer. So basically, I'm combining these questions into which is the worst benching, the Alphari or the Zven benching, and why the Zven benching isn't getting enough or as much attention. Okay, here are the reasons. Zven wasn't an MVP candidate. He wasn't one of two of the most hyped imports from last year into this year. You know, you had Perks and you had Alphari. Alphari, I think, is more core to his team's success than Zven was, like, especially by the time MSI rolled around. You know, you expect Perks to be a carry threat. We expect Fudge to be a carry threat, given how well he played at MSI. Blabber was the MVP, so it just seemed kind of more minor. And also, the way that Cloud9 did it was very quietly, kind of before the summer split started, whereas there was all this weird drama. See, the problem with what Team Liquid did was they kept their roster move in the news by doing a bazillion announcements and trying to like amend their previous shit, which just inherently drew more attention to it. So it was a bigger benching, and the PR was handled in a disastrous fashion from them. So that's why you're not hearing as much about it. Also, arguably, the problems were not with King, whereas the problems were very much without Alphari being there, in my opinion.
But this way, when have I made a video about the King benching? When has anyone on talk shows implied there's some fishy business or some fuckery going on? No one has. As far as we can tell, it is just what it appears to be. The team, perhaps not for performance reasons, decided at the moment we don't want to play with Zven. We'll bring him back later if it makes sense. No big deal. It doesn't seem to be any problem on his end. I haven't heard of him going ham behind the like, there's nothing. So as a result, by the way, some of this is that if something's legit, people have to get the word out there. So no one did on no case. As far as we can tell, there's nothing to question.
It was also that the entire team was aligned in their messaging around Zven. Zven didn't himself say anything about it, and it seemed like it was a group decision for whatever reason. And to be clear, I still don't know the reason personally. So this isn't something that I'm trying to cover up here. I actually do not know the reason why Zven was benched, but apparently it wasn't bad enough that they weren't going to bring him back.
Basically, it was implied something along the lines of like they thought that maybe like him and Perks were like too many critical voices in the team or something, and by having one of them out, you could sort of like work through issues, something like that. Again, it didn't sound like major, it just sounded like some minor thing that like, let's try this without you for a while, if that sort of vibe, but not like a punishment thing,
Yeah, and I will also say that Zven has one of the top work ethics of any pro, and obviously has an extremely strong rapport with Mithy, their now head coach. So it doesn't. It does seem to be rather a mild problem, and one that they could work through, because I don't think it's a motivation issue, and I don't think that it is a personality conflict with the coach, given that he and Mithy go way back and have always decided to work together. So that would be my read on it. Is the power Jatt showed as a coach a net positive or negative sign to the scene? I do think it's coaches should be invested in having their power, but to me it was just a judgment decision between knowing what was the most important factor to Team Liquid. So I would say that the power is probably a net positive. The wielding of said power was not great.
Right, from my perspective, anytime you want to accomplish something truly great, on some level, it must stem from an individual who gets to display their vision as clearly as possible. The problem is this. Jatt is not that individual. Like, technically, that individual would be the GM of Team Liquid. It would be the person who put the players together, then presumably, if you do the system right, hires Jatt to run his team. Now, that's the equivalent to having a Formula One team, and the guy who's just a driver decides everything about them. No, that's not the way it works. It's not the way a team works whatsoever. It's not the way the 1-2 relationship works. There's a million factors that are different. So the point is this. Within Jatt's little purview, he could have potentially a lot of say and a lot of control. Even so, I think he overstepped his bounds there. Secondly, and this is the more important issue, whenever you hear stories of the most legendary coaches ever having these crazy unorthodox methods, sometimes being very confrontational with players, even potentially like you might even say emotionally abusive language would be one from classic like 60s, 70s sport coaches, you will notice they're all the greatest winners of all time, right? If you haven't noticed, this is going to be a little secret for you in life here, guys. People, by definition, will treat you differently when you have done different things to other people. So when you sit around like some loser on Reddit going, but I said that opinion and I'm at -10, but then Doublelift said it and he's at +2,000. People like Doublelift, they know Doublelift, they appreciate Doublelift's thoughts. You are nobody, they don't like you, you're a fucking idiot. Like, I've solved the whole problem there. It never took anything to do with the conspiracy about Reddit upvotes, did it? So basically, I think Jatt's problem was this. If he'd have already won a bunch of LCS titles, if he'd have made top 8 at Worlds, if he'd have worked with different players and benched them and had his disputes, first of all, he'd have gotten a lot more leeway with the org. I don't think they would have fired him, quite frankly, if he'd had that track record. And secondly, even players would buy in more. Because you know what I said earlier about Dardoch and the idea that if you sign Dardoch now and then you're like, he's bloody causing problems. It's like, you're the idiot, mate. That's like you just bought someone's dog that bit 50 people beforehand and you wondered why it bit someone. But the point is, it's the other way around. Like, if Jatt had already won and he had this rep for, like, he's a difficult coach though, the guys joining his team would come in knowing that. They'd be like, look, I want to win, and so I'm willing to play under this guy. In the same way as when you hear those stories, by the way, about people like Belichick, there's a reason people don't tend to play there for 10 years. You go there, usually, by the way, when you're at the end of your career to ring chase, you think, right, listen, you're like Ocho Cinco or something like that. Guy doesn't like being fucking told what to do all the time. Tell you what, though, if he could have won one ring on the way out the door, he'll do it for 1 year. So that's also the other point. It's like buy-in is essentially what that whole dispute's about. For all I know, maybe Jatt's an amazing coach. I tell you what, though, he didn't get the buy-in of these players, and that is ultimately what killed him.
I also think that when you make a switch to coach from casting, you have a different perception of yourself than the players do, because you perceive yourself as having a lot of clout from casting and his years and years of experience within the game and being an analyst and doing those wonderful team fight breakdowns and everything that he did. The problem is that most players don't listen to your casting, and they're definitely not watching that content most of the time. Yeah, you really overvalue that. And so one of the things that really helps is developing a rapport with a bunch of players, which is actually when I was much more active in League of Legends when I was casting. This show helped me do, because I could talk to players for hours and have that one-on-one, and otherwise they're generally not watching a lot of the content that goes on.
No.
So you kind of, in your mind, are overvaluing their perception of you, which also I experienced myself coaching, so I can just straight up have that experience. So I think that's another issue, is like, you really, until you actually get the W's and until you start to form these relationships with the player, it's very difficult to not overplay your hand. And I've kind of made that mistake in the past as well. Let's see here. If you had to pick one broadcast talent from any game to be stuck on a deserted island, who would it be and why? We can't pick each other. Let's start with that. I would say for me, it would be probably Moses from CSGO. First off, I think he'd be really easy to get along with on a desert island. And also he does backpacking and has survival skills. So purely from a living on a desert island perspective, I would probably go with him.
Pretty good one. Also, just one of the most amiable people.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably not going to kill each other.
I'll go a bit left field on this one because this won't make any sense to fans who only know his broadcast persona because somehow none of this leaks into it. I would actually pick Crumbs. Because he's just literally one of the most like well-read people I think I've ever met in my entire life, and also like a fantastically open-minded person. So he's just a brilliant person to have conversations with, basically.
Also, he wouldn't get tilted or freak out. He rolls with the punches super well in life. Yeah, he's great.
That's one of the reasons, by the way, why I think you never see any of that shit in his broadcast. He's not insecure, so he's not just jamming it all in there all the time, so it's just whatever.
Easy going for sure. How do we determine which side a person falls under when they are a content creator who uses journalistic methods and standards in esports? Which standard do we hold people like Travis Gafford to? Well, funny you ask this. We're probably going to talk about this on the Four Horsemen this week with Richard, who I know has very strong opinions about this. I think the game that Travis Gafford plays, where he simultaneously wants to be considered a serious journalist while decrying whenever anyone holds him to those standards, is ridiculous. I personally am not a fan of it. I think like he should not be expected to hold any journalistic standards or have any objective reporting, and he needs to pick which side of the fence he wants to sit on.
Yeah, what I don't think fans are getting here is none of us sat down and said, look, Travis, as a member of the official guild of journalists, you must... We never said that whatsoever. Like, he's the one who presented himself as a journalistic figure, someone who reporting on sources, doing journalistic work. Like, I don't know if people know this, but it's actually a form of how the law works in a lot of countries. In some countries, it doesn't matter what you call yourself, or even if you have a contract to work with someone. If you perform certain labor in certain ways for those people, essentially they'll just look at the action and go, you were working for him, you obviously worked for this amount of money, he owes you this, and sometimes you don't even have to have a contract, it'll all just be enforced by the court. So what I would say is the same thing, is if Travis doesn't want to be considered a journalist, by the way, I have no issue with that whatsoever. Here's what you do. Next time someone says, well, what you're saying is just gossip and all that, no, you just have to say, maybe it is. That you have to take on the chin, because the only thing that was protecting you was I'm using the journalistic method, and therefore if I'm wrong, for example, some of my colleagues could find that out, or you can go and I have sources, you can trust them because I followed this method and I myself am verified. Like, these are all things that you're using, obviously, to prop up your perspective. So if you want to be, by the way, like Keemstar or something, that is fine. Have at it. Totally, you don't see me ragging on people like Keemstar, by the way. He's got his own little fucking niche and he sticks in it and he stays doing his shit there. He doesn't come out and then go, Thorin, I'm a better journalist than you. No, he just stays in his world as Keemstar, right? Travis's problem is this. He doesn't want to be Keemstar. He knows that to be Keemstar would be a fucking death worse than death, a pain worse than death to him. So he simultaneously wants to play a fucking journalist on TV while also really being Keemstar. It's like, which one is it, mate? Pick. Just pick.
Well, the other problem is that he doesn't have some sort of unwavering commitment to the truth or objectivity, which is expected from journalists. Now, nobody is ever going to reach the true objective standard, right? Because that's impossible. But at least with most journalists, you know that they have that ideal and that they're trying to work towards that and that there's a reasonable progression. The problem with Travis is that I have no idea what his value system is. Right? I don't know what the purpose of what he does is. As far as I can tell, when he calls someone out, it's because it's hurting him personally. And he will only do it. He will only call Riot out. He will only call people out when it is something that is going to financially affect him. And he doesn't have any overarching commitment to the truth where he's going to call stuff out that doesn't affect him whatsoever. So for me, it's always extremely suspicious because I can't trust him because I don't understand his fundamental framework of values. And I would love to hear what they are.
You just described it, Monty. This is why I personally don't have a problem with Travis. I've known him a long, long time. I can get along with him pretty well in person. I just assume he acts in his own self-interest at all times, and anything otherwise is just fancy window dressing. He's telling me. So when I do that, I find him being a perfectly predictable fucking object on the chessboard.
Sure, but you can't play the objective journalist game and tell us there are problems when it's only problems that affect you, and you don't actually delve into problems that may affect your relationship with Right, you lose the
But here's the best way to explain it. You think I haven't had loads of people who are fans of mine who say to me, like, Thorin, why don't you just ease up on Reckless? Maybe one day you could get an interview with him. What about Nico and CSGO? He's never going to do an interview now you've trashed him. What they don't get is this, Monty. I always explain to them, you are aware, if you like my interviews, by definition, I could never have my interview with Reckless.
Yep.
He showed himself to be a little bitch about half a decade ago, who literally said he'd only do interviews with Travis. If you don't like Travis interviews, but you do like my interviews, why are you asking for all of my interviews to have to become Travis's interviews, you dumb fuck? When I would do that, I'd get all the interviews. They wouldn't be mine anymore, would they? You have to pick. If you want all the interviews, they can never be the best, I'm afraid. It's just the way they work.
Yeah. Also, it's like, why, when we talk about this show, there are some people who won't come on this show for various reasons. Good reasons for them. Yeah. But we like the way the show is, so we're not going to change it, because then it becomes something the show isn't, and that's not the purpose of Summoning Insight. So
also, probably just, by the way, I know to a fan they'll never get this because they're just vicariously watching at home. By the way, if someone like Reckless genuinely is like, look, I don't have any interest in shows like that, in fact I find them to be harmful, then don't come on. It's fine. Yeah. Don't ever worry about it, mate. We don't need you. You don't need us. Just stick in your zone and we'll just keep doing what we're doing. It's fine. It's totally fine, guys.
When I go out and book guests for this show, I get turned down sometimes, and people say, no, I don't want to be in that show. And I say, okay, fair enough. And then I just move on with my fucking life, I totally get it. All right. So this is based off the fantasy book question that when both of us said we don't really read fantasy. What is the sci-fi book you would recommend to people? Thorin, I know we both love Dune, you especially.
I mean, I'll just reiterate, it's the fourth one, God Emperor of Dune. So you've got to read through 3 other books, but it's worth it, put it that way. There's one I'd have to say. Is there one that we would pick out aside from Dune?
Well, I was talking to you like last year about the Hyperion books, which I think are incredible, especially because I tend to like soft sci-fi, which means that I like more philosophical science fiction rather than the super technical like science fiction. So like hard sci-fi would be like The Martian, for example, which is not to say I don't like it, but I just prefer kind of the more philosophical angle and like thought experiments, which is what I like about Dune. It's what I like about Hyperion. And so Hyperion is amazing because I took, year-long seminars in romantic poetry. Hyperion is based off of a Keats kind of unfinished epic poem. I love Keats. Keats is actually like a AI cyborg personality, John Keats, the poet. So and it's based off of the Canterbury Tales, where these pilgrims are going to this like kind of bizarre time anomaly site. And so I think that book is incredible if you like soft sci-fi. The amount of references in it, Dan Simmons is just amazing. His knowledge of literature is crazy.
I found it mad. It's one of those ones where when I finished reading those first 2 books, I went online and I was just wondering, like, what is the hype around these books? Like, are they like super popular? Because I hadn't heard anyone blow me up about these for years. Like, they may be on the odd list of like top 20 books or whatever, but no one was ever pushing these that they push like Game of Thrones and shit now, right? Dude, you won't even believe this. The second one, which I think's better, by the way. I think the second book's even fucking better.
Yes.
No joke, they were saying the plot is shit. What?
The plot's awesome.
Plot is fucking the way that plot slowly reveals, like a proper slow burner, and then finally the whole thing comes. It's fucking unreal. What a sick idea that was. Yeah. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Truly, like, that is it's high tier literature. It requires an insane.
Fans might not get it. It's hard to understand, but it's a fucking amazing concept if you understood what they were talking about.
It basically takes a lot of romantic poetry and Chaucer and then reinvents it in crazy ways that really make you think about the original texts as well, and then how these things could exist in like artificial intelligence in the future. It's mind blowing. It's so good. So yeah. Can you define real literature?
From the comic side, I'll just say check out the Meta Barons by
Jodorowsky. Oh yeah, anything Jodorowsky, like Meta Barons, Inkal, what else? Techno Priests, all that shit's sick. Can you define real literature and what do you look for in an author? Well, it's like porn. I know it when I see it, right? It has to have a certain level of artistic value and philosophical depth to it, right? So, in theory.
You can like some stuff that's a bit low level as well. Depends what it turns out.
So look. I love The Count of Monte Cristo. It's one of my favorite books. Do I consider it high literature? No. It was pulp fiction at the time. It was the equivalent of a soap opera. It's like 1,500 pages long because it was released in serial in newspapers and magazines, right? And so it's incredibly entertaining, but I don't think that there is a deep philosophical meaning that I get when I read Moby Dick, right? Just different. You can enjoy either. I enjoy both. What are your thoughts on Brett Favre?
I think that's a tough one because
he's an interesting one.
I actually think that's a perfect example of where the way that people try to analyze how good players are using stats will never make sense. Because Brett Favre's a great example of a player who was really fucking good, like very, very good fucking arm as a quarterback. Vision to make plays, fantastic. By the way, he didn't have like constantly stacked rosters his whole career. He played in fucking Wisconsin. What do you expect? But if you just look, right, here's an example, in my opinion, of why in the NFL they have got to kill using like turnovers to touchdowns as the fucking stat. It can't be interceptions to touchdowns, because Brett Favre is someone who breaks that with the eye test. Like, I don't care if this guy throws 2 interceptions in a game. He might give you like 7 chances to win the game,
right.
and the other quarterback gives you 3. Now, I wouldn't put him as the best player ever, because I think he also, as a result, throws a bunch of games. But like, there's a type of player like that you get in esports all the time, where like the stats sheet will never show they're that sick, but the impact, or like, I'll give you an example from CSGO. If you were watching any of our Flashpoint tournaments, KNG from MIBR, he's never going to have the best like raw stats in the tournament. He's a fantastic impact player. He just destroys games that he's in. Like, he tears them apart. So I think he was a very, very good player. I think if anything, though, like I say, the stats nerds have probably fucking took him down a few too many pegs. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I think he's a great player. I do think also that he is really he's like an incredibly important piece to probably one of the best NFL teams ever, which is the 96 Packers. So that roster, I think, was rated, they were in the top 20, I think, of the recently the NFL did a countdown of the top 100 teams, and I think that roster was in the top 20. Okay. But they won the Super Bowl in 96, and they were very close to going back to back. The Broncos beat them in 97, but they were favored heading into that Super Bowl, and that roster of players was just crazy good all around. So certainly he benefited from that, but he was an extremely vital component of that in the mid 90s. And even then he had some good seasons on the Jets and Vikings even after he left Green Bay. Oh. So
he almost made the final on the Vikings.
Yeah. So really good player overall. Worse than John Elway, but still good. So let's see here. What else we got? Have either of you read some of the most acclaimed or popular manga, such as Berserk/One Piece? What is your view on the difference of storytelling medium compared to other books? Okay, so I actually haven't read a lot of manga. I've read many more graphic novels, but I, watched a ton of anime in high school and college, and I still occasionally watch it today. Manga has never been a medium that I like as much as graphic novels because, in general, like, I prefer the art style of most Western graphic novels, and also manga's pushed out really fast, like in those like weekly segments, and so it's less detailed and there's a lot more filler, generally speaking. So it's never been my favorite. I think that it translates really well to anime when they convert the series, but I've never really liked reading it myself.
I've basically almost never read manga, but I did start reading the Berserk stuff recently. Just basically, if it's good, I'll pass it on to Monty. Basically, just because like the art, like this is some stuff where some of the art scenes do look like worthy of like some of those European comic books. So like, if it gets really good, I'll buy like the proper full size ones, not the fucking shitty little toilet paper they make manga on.
Yeah. Let's see here. Which is more valuable when flexing a champion through multiple roles, champion mastery or lane mastery?
I have a little side take on that, by the way, because I personally think that is the most underrated part of League of Legends, is that that people only do the role swaps now based on the idea they also wanted to swap to that role. It would make more sense to me, Monty, if they just said my best champion's in that role, and I've always sort of role-filled it a little bit. Because in my opinion, champion mastery has always been way more important than champion strength. Throughout the whole history of the game, you can see so many players who can win a losing matchup because they're just a god on that champion. Like, they just know everything about the kit. They have something about their brain. Like, the obvious one's the Lee Sin players. I don't give a fuck where Lee Sin's strength was. There are certain players in history, if it's vaguely viable, you pick it, and they carry the game, of course.
Yeah, and I think too, the question is like for the mage meta that was in bot lane, or for example, like Renekton players now playing at mid. So we have seen teams, Cloud9 has done this where they kind of swap perks and fudge between the lanes. I'm a bit surprised we haven't seen some of the mid laners play bot lane. So like when you see like Senna Ziggs, like 100 Thieves has been doing, you could run a support champion mid lane and then move Huhi there. Huhi's kind of a weird case though, because he obviously was a mid laner. So he has some of these champions historically in his pool. But yeah, I think it just depends on how comfortable it is, but you have to be able to do both, I would say. Let's do one more. When SKT and Samsung played in 2017, I was cheering against SKT. When Astralis made finals in CSGO, I cheered against them. Every year in F1, I cheer against Lewis Hamilton. Is it the right mindset to cheer against the legend in an esport or sport, or should I wish for the dynasty to keep going? There's not a right answer to this, right? Because, you know, you can cheer against them, but if the legend is defeated, that means you have a really exciting narrative. That's what's so awesome about F1 this season, is like the Verstappen versus Hamilton battle that's currently going on is incredibly fun to watch. But at the same time, having that dynasty is just a confirmation of greatness. And if Hamilton is now one of the best F1 drivers of all time. So it's like, if you look at a legacy, wanting it to end is kind of lame in a way. Like, as much as I hate the Patriots, it is still extraordinary to have watched them win 6 Super Bowls with Tom Brady, right? So, you know, I hate them, but at the same time, them continuing to win is just, it's amazing to watch, because I'm never going to see that again in my lifetime, most likely. So there is something beautiful about witnessing that greatness. So I think that dichotomy is wonderful. Like, I enjoy both sides of that simultaneously. It doesn't bother me.
Personally, I just do it based on whether I like him or if I don't. So if I like the dynasty, obviously I want to see him win more. If I don't, then fuck him. And my reasons usually aren't based on personal aspects. That tends to come later in the industry bullshit. It just tends to be playing style. Like, there's certain teams I just don't like their style, so I don't want it to win. Just purely selfish.
That's fair. All right. That's our questions for this week, guys. Appreciate it. Again, you can go into our Discord server for Insight on Esports. Go to the GrogCoin channel. There'll be a pinned message there about how to get into the GrogCoin channel, where you can
Next questions will be on 4 Horsemen anyway, so we'll do some of the other ones there.
Yes. Well, we're out for now, I think. But yes, we'll do some more on 4 Horsemen this week when we talk about some of the Riot media issues.